Okay, so let's start the hearing and we'll see where this takes us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Milton Board of Appeals. And this is the January 19th meeting, 2002, of the applicant for the residences at East Milton. Also with me tonight are board members Jeffrey Mullen and Nick Gray. This hearing was continued to this evening so that the applicant could file additional materials in response to requests from the peer reviewers. And indeed, on January 13th, 2020, we received additional materials from the applicant that were very professionally done. They consisted of different addresses by their experts to the comments of Mr. Bomer and Sean Reardon. The whole submittal was 57 pages in length with a lot of photographs and plans and sophisticated professional information. And there was an appendix of 30 pages that were attached to the additional materials, consisting of a Tetra Tech comment letter dated 11/17/2022, sewer observation memo, a hydrant flow test results, and the site plan approval by the Milton Planning Board, which was on June 27th, 2019. And all of those materials were published as soon as we received them on our website. We also received, and I think you did as well, Mr. Freeman, an email from the Milton Town Engineer, Marina Fernandez, agreeing to the approval of the stormwater plan that was discussed at the last hearing, but requesting 2 conditions to that plan. And so all of that's part of the record at this proceeding. So Mr. Freeman, do you want to present any evidence in whatever form you deem proper, describing the additional materials and any witnesses you may want to have testify regarding those matters, so we can continue to make progress in this case?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was smiling because for some reason I was almost going to say thank you, Your Honor, which I'm sure you wouldn't mind that accolade.
I wouldn't mind that because I'd be broke, Mr. Freeman, if I was if I took a judgeship.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your explanation of the indeed thorough package that we submitted. So I'm just going to give a brief overview, and then we'll give the floor over to our team, and Jen will basically walk through the changes that were summarized. And we have made changes for the public's benefit and anybody else. We have reduced the size of the project by 3 more units and made some other changes to the Franklin Street facade and setback. So we believe that we've responded sincerely as much as we could, but in real positive substance to many of the comments, including those of your architectural peer review. We also have provided what you had requested at the last hearing, a comparison of the budgets to show why any further reduction is really uneconomic. And we included the chart. I'm not going to explain it. We're not really going to elaborate on it unless you have questions, just a brief explanation. Bottom line is, as you see in the charts in general show, The reduction is basically bringing the project return to 20% less than what the 40B guidelines and policies consider to be uneconomic, or 20% below what would be the bottom of economic. And we have a chart illustrating that. And, you know, in perhaps more terms that you and others in the public can understand, you know, that the 5% return is the lowest that a developer is going to go. It's based on the T-bills and return and the total development cost and all of that. But I won't belabor that now, but we did respond as you requested. And, you know, it really shows to us very clearly, as well as we hope to you and the board, that, you know, we are where we are. And again, with having made some significant changes all along the way. The other thing that I would just mention, and it's at the end of our package, maybe it's not quite the end, but in any case, I did respond to the questions about the parking from the restaurants and the parking or requirements or not, as the case may be, in the permits that the two restaurants have. And so, you know, I'm not going to go into lengthy detail, but I'll save that for the end. And there is certainly going to be presentation by Jen, our architect, and Connor Nagel to go over. And, you know, we hope that Mr. Reardon has had a chance to review. Naturally, you want him to chime in as we do. I will just say one thing. I appreciate your pointing out the response from Ms. Fernandez at DPW. So, you know, that had been a question, you know, related to those things. And so, you know, it seems clear that we've satisfied those things. The one thing we weren't able to achieve, despite trying like crazy with another outside engineering consultant, is the additional study related to the stormwater that had been brought up, and that was a mounding analysis. So we've been trying like crazy. You can imagine we were the ones more than anybody, or we are the ones more than anybody that wants that to be concluded. However, unfortunately, despite our best efforts, that is not done yet. So, you know, as I'm sure we'll discuss later, but we do think that we've had a complete package and responses to everything. So, you know, as you know, I know you're not going to be surprised to hear me say it, but I just want to tell you in advance that we would hope that we could, you know, close the hearing. And I just want to tell you in regard to that mounding study, we would be satisfied with having a condition that says that, however we phrase it, the mounding conditioned on the mounding study showing that we're able to comply with that regulation. So with that, I will turn it over to Jen.
Let me just mention one thing so that everyone's aware. Sean Reardon is with us tonight, so at the start of your presentation. I understand from Judy Barrett that Cliff Bowmer is finishing up another 40B hearing presently, that he should be available at 7:30 this evening, so that we'll hopefully have him available for further comment on the changes that we've made.
Thank you. If I forgot one thing, was just about my crazy schedule as well, which I had emailed you and the board ahead of time, but just so everybody knows, my team is well aware. Somebody called it a possible filibuster, but I don't think it will be necessary. I'm going to have to leave your hearing. I'm not sure when. I have my eye on my other laptop, just to conclude a hearing in another town, which should not be long because it's really just a few changes in a decision that had already been reviewed. So I just want to state that and apologize if it has to be that I leave it at an inopportune moment. I'm sure you will have things to talk about, vice versa, with my team and your board. So thank you.
That's fine. Just let us know when you're leaving and when you come back, and we'll be sure to grade you. So why don't you proceed with your presentation?
Hey, Jen.
Yes. I just need the permission to share my screen, if that's okay.
Of course. Hi, Ms. Corcoran. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you, Chair Leonard?
Good. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good to be back.
The floor is yours.
All right. I'm still getting a disabled screen sharing. If somebody would be able to toggle that. Zoom is so fun.
Sorry.
Don't worry about it.
No, we have a new person on board behind the scenes, so I'm sorry he
Oh,
forgot to. Hello? Can somebody do the allow share screen share?
Bev, are you a co-host?
I'm the host.
So on the screen share button, there should be a little tiny kind of arrow next to it.
Oh, there
If you
is.
click on that,
top of it.
yeah, it has options. One of them is like, you just click it. I forget exactly what the terminology is, but you should be
I'm
able
gonna
to
put
click a
share.
button.
Yeah, but if I put share, that's a little scary, Tim. To be honest.
It's the way that you enable all panelists to share. So
So I'm gonna hit the share button.
there's a little button next to the share button that
there's
brings
a-
up the options.
Option, I have share sound and optimize for video clip. That's it. Hello, Sean?
I'm here.
Oh, do we do share screen, please?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Oh, okay. Know what? I gotta go in. There we go. Apologies.
Thank
Every
you.
time this thing updates, it goes back to factory settings. Okay,
There
you
you go.
should be good now.
Thank you.
All right,
All
wonderful.
set, sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it. All righty. All right, can everyone see my screen?
I
Double
can't.
checking. All right, wonderful. So again, thank you, Chair Leonard and members of the board for having us here tonight to continue our discussion of the residences at East Milton. The agenda tonight is basically just to recap the submission from last week. And so, Mr. Bowen won't be missing anything by coming in. I think it will actually time up quite nicely in time for the discussion. So I'll give a brief overview of the submission. Connor Nagel from VHB will discuss the civil engineering aspects of the project that have been updated. We have Frank Valdez from DeMella Schaefer, who will discuss the architecture and design updates. And then Carrie Pike from Howard Stein Hudson will be discussing the parking memo that we submitted. And then we'll wrap everything up with a discussion of the legal aspects, including the parking from the restaurants and the subdivision easement of the subdivided property that's on the site. And so just a very quick overview, just to give a sense to everybody of where we're at in relation to where we began. So we submitted in November of 2020. And at that time, we had 101 spaces, 101 units and 130 spaces. And we just put the return on cost in there to refer back to the feasibility analysis that was submitted as well. But just to give you a sense, kind of, because where we're at is a product of a lot of the trade-offs that have been made thus far, particularly in the setback. So you can see that as the setback has increased of the building off of Bassett and Franklin Streets, our parking count has gone down. So just to give a kind of a sense of the relationship between, when we make a change somewhere, it pops up elsewhere that there's another change made. So every part of the project really impacts the rest of it. And so currently we're at 92 units, 104 parking spaces. One of the major changes that was made is increasing the percentage of standard size parking spaces as opposed to compact size parking spaces. We'll get into all of those aspects kind of further on down the line, but just wanted to give a brief overview of what we'll be looking at tonight. One of the, we think that the project is looking good. We think that it's in good shape and has been responding to many of the, points of clarification that the consultants have asked. We revisited the vision plan for East Milton Square that was produced by the Barrett Consulting Group back in March of 2021. And we're pretty excited to see that, many aspects of this project kind of fit into that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Connor Nagel from VHB to discuss the updates to the civil engineering.
Good evening. For the record, again, Connor Nagel with VHB.
Hi, Mr. Nagel. Welcome back to the Board of Appeals. It's good to see you.
Likewise, thank you. So we compiled the response to comments letter in response to Mr. Reardon's letter from last November. I'll touch on the major civil issues and be happy to answer any questions on anything else within the letter. Starting with the sewer, as you can see on screen, are a couple of photographs in the middle of the two manholes on Franklin Street. And the others are screen captures from CCTV footage of sewer line. We did not find any evidence of surcharging or any structural issues within the system. The system is running pretty low and does not appear to have any capacity issues. And as was stated before, DPW are not aware of any capacity issues. So in my opinion, as I expressed in the letter, I think the sewer system is able to take this development. Moving on to hydrant flow test, that was part of the same comment in Mr. Reardon's letter about the capacity of the water system. We did perform hydrant flow tests out on Bassett Street, where we would be proposing to connect the water. We found pretty good pressure in the system. The building that we're proposing would require a booster pump. The information there on the slide is provided by Frank DeMille-Schaefer and his design team for the water in the building. The residual pressure in the system, as noted in the flow test, was also pretty good, pretty high. So I don't believe that an emergency call or this project coming online would have any significant effect on the surrounding properties and the residual water pressure in the system. So on stormwater, as was mentioned previously by Peter, we had correspondence with DPW on the requested waiver of setback of the infiltration system. DPW, the town engineer, Ms. Fernandez, responded this morning that she had no issue with that, and as Peter mentioned, proposed 2 conditions which we have no issue with accepting. We changed or updated the connection of the overflow from that infiltration system to a more downstream connection closer to the intersection on Franklin Street. This was recommended by Mr. Reardon, and when we analyzed the calculations, confirmed his thoughts on that and made that update. I think that was the outstanding issues there. I can discuss the abutter peer review from Mackenzie, if that would be good.
Sure, that's fine.
That came in yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to respond to it, but I can certainly speak to the questions in there. The first point was referring to the groundwater elevation used. We used the elevations from the stabilized wells, not the observed groundwater in the boring at the time it was taken. This is standard engineering practice. It's why we install wells and provides a more realistic groundwater elevation. So that's what we do. The second point is regarding additional analysis. That's again standard engineering practice, and it's certainly something we would be doing prior to developing construction documents. There will be more geotechnical investigation done both for the structural development of the building and for stormwater. To point 3, maintaining the 2-foot separation. Again, that will come from the additional geotechnical analysis, and we will be sure to do that. The geotechnical engineer is doing a mounding analysis right now that has not been completed. I wouldn't anticipate there being any issue with such a small infiltration system and relatively good infiltration rates, but you know that remains to be proven with a mounding analysis. On the last 2 points with regard to ponding lower down on Franklin Street, the peer review states that we have an increase in flow in the larger storms. That is true as it is with pretty much any stormwater analysis such as this. We are mitigating the peaks, which is required under all the regulations. the MS4 regulations, local bylaw and state standards do not require volume mitigation, nor is it standard practice to do so. That would only be a concern if the municipal system was discharging to an isolated low point, for instance, a small wetland or something where the additional volume would pond up over time. That's not the case with the municipal system in question here or anywhere along Franklin Street. It's more likely that any ponding there is more of a maintenance concern, I would think, or maybe a capacity issue at the inlets around there. But once we reduce the peaks from our flow, I don't believe that we will have any effect on the downstream on Franklin Street. So that's it from the engineering utilities side of things, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, whether now or at the end of the presentation.
Right,
Thank you.
well, let's do it now to maintain our sanity. Mr. Reardon, do you have any questions of Mr. Nagel?
No, I think everything.
Or any comments, whatever, they don't have to be questions. obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point it'd be helpful if I just go through the 5 issues that we talked about last time we were, but I think everything Connor said is on point and I agree with. So I don't really have any questions for him or anything to add right now.
Okay, let me check with my fellow board members. Jeff Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Nagel?
No questions, John.
How about Nick Gray? Do you have any questions of Mr. Nagel?
No, no questions. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Let me just ask, any person present out there in virtual land have any questions of Mr. Nagel's presentation?
Hold on, John. Attendees. No.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Mr. Nagel. Ms. Corcoran, why don't you present your next witness?
Certainly, I will turn things over to Frank Valdez, who is going to update us on the top floor on the Franklin Street facade, among other exciting issues.
Thank you very much.
Hi,
Thank
Mr.
you to the board.
Valdez, how are you? Welcome back.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that we wanted to present today as part of our continuation of responding to some of the comments that have been addressed by the consultants for the city has been the setbacks on the Franklin Street side. And one of the things I wanted to show is that we started looking into the idea of why we ended up with 92 units now. It's been a reduction of units because we actually created a setback on the 5th floor of the building on the Franklin Street side per some of the recommendations that have been suggested previously. So we can go to this section, Jen. And one of the things that we wanted to show the board is one of the things that we've done from the Franklin Street side is the top floor, the 5th floor, we've set back 7 feet. We had to reorganize some of the units. We lost some units, and that's why we ended up in 92 units, but we were able to set back 7 feet from the face of the building back. We were also able to set back about 1.3 inches on the 4th floor, as you can see. So we did a 2 setbacks on the facing Franklin Street. And in addition to that, one of the things that we've been doing throughout this process is the articulation of the facade so that we can emphasize the reading of the 3 stories on the pedestrian realm, and therefore be able to just address that massing component in that fashion and setting back the residual pieces above that. But we've been able to do that. We are now also have from previous design reiterations, our sidewalk on Franklin Street is also 10 feet from previous things. So from the top of the curb cut to the face of the building, it's a 10-foot dimension.
What was it previously, Mr. Valdez?
I'm sorry?
What was it previously? It's now 10 feet.
It's now 10 feet, but we had done that previously. And previous to that, I believe it was about 6 feet. So we were able to push it 4 feet back further. So we pushed the building back in order to have the 10-foot clear dimension for the sidewalk in that area. Yes.
I'm just, why don't you continue with your presentation? Thanks for making that.
Sure. Thank you. And from what you can see, we looked around in some of the dimensions of some of the sidewalks around, and we felt that 10 feet was an adequate extension to that sidewalk to be able to enhance the pedestrian realm. We would like to also emphasize that as previously designed, per some of the commentaries and some of the design reiterations, on the Bassett Street sidewalk, at a minimum, we have a 20-foot sidewalk at its narrowest and 38 feet at its widest on the corner of Bassett and Franklin. So we have a large setback on the Bassett Street side, and then we have a 10-foot setback on the sidewalk on the Franklin Street side. And now we wanted to also talk about the next issue, which is the parking components that have been addressed in some of the commentary. And we wanted to discuss what we've done. And we revisited the parking garage, and we went and looked back, and I think that we can show that parking level. Yeah, thank you. We went back and re-looked at some of the reconfigurations and some of the comments, and what you're seeing is really the revision of them. We really tried to stay within the bylaws that have been established by Milton in their parking dimensions in order to keep compliant parking spaces as well as driving aisles. So everything that you're seeing is compliant within the bylaws and the requirements that have been established. We do have, as the studies has done, and you will see as it is presented later on by Carrie, it is a one-way circulation system, so that we try to keep that as you're going in and throughout the component. But the one component that we were not able to fully satisfy is the compact. We are at 39% of parking for compact spaces. We reduced it from our previous presentations. We were closer to a 49% previously, and we're capable of just reconfiguring our parking demand and our parking count, and it's been reduced, and we have it at 39%, still higher than the bylaws, which is 25%. But one of the things that I think that the chart was showing previously is that we looked at other towns, surrounding towns, and other towns within the area in which their parking counts range between 30% to 50% for compact parking spaces. And we just wanted to showcase that. We have a total of 104 parking spaces. We have 5 handicap spaces. We've allocated 2 handicap parking spaces in the parking garage and 3 handicap parking spaces on the grade parking level. Carrie will show the district, in more detail, the circulation of trucks and cars through that. But this reflects the most recent revision to the massing and to the parking demand and parking garage has been addressed previously.
All right, so actually this brings us into Kerry, so I'm not sure.
Well,
if you wanna just-
yeah, thanks, Jen. Let me just back up a little bit, and I'm not sure Mr. Bulmer is here yet. Let me just
Yes.
clarify.
He is,
He is.
Mr. Chair, he is. I just wanted you to know he's not on the panelist group yet, but he is here.
Okay, well, let's, Bev, are you able
Yeah,
to
yeah. Hold on a second.
upgrade his status?
Thank you. I'm gonna do that right now. Okay, he's in.
Mr. Bulmer?
I am here. Hello.
Ah, well, welcome back to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Bulmer.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again. I don't know whether you've had a chance to listen to Mr. Valdez's testimony. And if you have, I guess I'd like to turn the floor over to you, see if you have any questions or comments regarding the 2 or 3 subject areas that he discussed.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am happy to be back here. I did hear about a third, I think, of the presentation, but maybe more importantly, I did review all of the materials that we received a week or so ago. So I have looked at the changes that have been made, and I think I can say very much a unqualified manner that I think it was very good to see the introduction of some real articulation on the Franklin Street side of the building. You may recall from the last time I spoke, there were two kind of big issues and then just a number of smaller issues. For me, frankly, the biggest issue was exactly the Franklin Street elevation. It is the part of the building, or one of the two major parts of the building, that really engages with the public realm. You recall, as Mr. Valdez pointed out, there was an initial movement of the building over in a previous iteration, but the height of it, the sheer height of it as it rose up above the sidewalk, was not broken by any step backs, and it was largely a superficial articulation on that side. So what we've seen so far have been some ground level perspective views. I think it makes a very big difference. We certainly look forward to seeing the other drawings submitted, new elevations, and just so we're really clear that what we're looking at. There are very small issues associated with coordination of the landscape plan with the perspective views. These are very detail oriented. What I was really looking for was whether the height of the building off of the sidewalk along Franklin Street was really appropriate and set a good example for development on that street, and really recognize the importance that that walkway will have. So I'm very happy to see these changes introduced. The other issue that I think all of you are probably tired of hearing me talk about is how well the courtyard may or may not work. There certainly have been improvements in that courtyard area, but I think, again, in my hierarchy of issues, the public realm really wins if post-development, if there are issues with delivery trucks getting annoyed using the courtyard or whatever else, I'm sure modifications could be made. That, from my perspective, they're not the big issues. So where I would leave it from a strictly architectural perspective is I'm supportive of the direction. We haven't seen a complete resubmission that really shows all of the drawings. They are important. The elevations really matter with all of the appropriate call outs. So I look forward to seeing those. There are a small handful of just almost kind of due diligence, very typical types of items that I would want to go through once we have the more complete documents. So I would reserve a little bit of space for those kinds of items. I haven't had the time to really do it yet. And I think time would be better served if we had some additional documentation. I will say that I think I'm not a parking specialist, but I think from my own experience of designing comparable buildings myself, I think the kind of parking ratio and a percentage of compact cars makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's in a good place, particularly given where the development is. Just a few other very brief comments, and then I think you probably want to hear from Sean, the civil reviewer. The coordination issue, I think what we would want to see is once the drawings are pulled together, it would be across civil, landscape, and architectural, making sure all that site information is is coordinated in a final submission. I think that is about it. As I said, I did review all the materials that were sent last week or 8 or 9 days ago. I thought I did read, again, I'm not a parking specialist, but again, I'm just using my own experience. I did run through the parking summary that was also provided. And I think it made a lot of good sense, including information about how pickup and delivery would take place, reserving times for moving vehicles to take over parking spaces. These are not unconventional ideas, and I think with good management, it could work very well. So I think that's where I'm at this point. Again, I'm very glad that the developer chose to really make a change on Franklin Street. It will make a very big difference.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. I appreciate your inconveniencing yourself for attending 2 hearings and getting back to us so quickly. It's very helpful, particularly with timing schedules that we all have. Mr. Reardon, do you have any questions of Mr. Valdez or any comments that you want to make?
Oh, not right now. Thank you, though.
Okay, then let me check with my fellow board members. Mr. Jeffrey Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Valdez or any comments you want to make?
Can you speak to whether or not there's any treatment on the Franklin Street sidewalk to control jumping the curb?
When you say jumping the curb, you mean a car going over it? Would that be the question, Jeffrey? Mr. Mullen?
Yeah,
Yeah, there would be a granite curb, and I believe that it would have to comply with the standards for the curb, and I believe that they're 6 to 8 inches. But yes, there would be a curb that is aligned on that entire street that would prevent for that.
it won't though, right? We know it won't. That's the point. That's why I asked the question. I thought
Yes.
that was the bollard treatment that was proposed at one point.
No, it's not. It would be an elevated sidewalk with a curb cut.
I'm sorry, are we talking about Franklin Street or Bassett Street?
Franklin.
No. On Franklin Street, so is this in response to the kind of the delivery trucks parking on the curb there?
Correct.
So they'll have a tough time doing that with the street trees that you can see in this rendering to the left. I don't know if there's enough space in between those trees.
Yeah. All right. I thought we were headed in a direction of an affirmative barrier to control that. I think that's going to be an issue, but okay. Thank you. That's all I had, John.
Okay, thanks, Jeffrey. Nick, do you have any questions? Greg?
Only, I don't know if this is the time when we get any information on the, and maybe it's too early, but any information on the construction, the actual plan to construct this revised building, construction management plan.
Mr. Valdez, do you want to address that issue?
I would turn it to you, Jen, about the construction plan.
Yes. So is there a specific question about the construction management plan that was submitted in the draft CMP was submitted in October, but we can answer any questions that you have regarding it.
No, I guess I was looking for more detail, but if you're sticking with the October submission, that's fine. Thank you.
Do you intend, Jen, do you intend to update the construction development plan?
So the only comment that we had received on the construction management plan was in regards to the spaces that would be taken out of commission during the duration of the construction period. Mr. Reardon made a comment about that. And there are 3 spaces on Bassett Street, excuse me, that would be impacted while we rebuild, the curb and things like that. But we would do our best to make sure that those spaces are in rotation as much as possible and mitigate the duration in which they would be unavailable. But during certain points of the construction, we will have to, have people not park there in order to construct the sidewalk and the curb.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just ask, is Bob Galvin present tonight? I think he is.
I am here.
Hi, Mr. Galvin, how are you?
Good evening.
Good. Do you have any questions of Mr. Valdez that you want to ask?
No, but I just wanted to remind you, Chair Leonard, that I do have Ms. Spratt here. We had prepared to have her speak tonight on the issues that we raised concerning the site engineering. And then I was hoping I might have a few minutes just to kind of respond to some of the things that I saw in the most recent filing.
I think that's certainly acceptable. Let's see what time it is when we get to that. We're moving along quicker than I expected. And certainly you'll have the right to make comments, and we'll be delighted to hear from your expert witness. Do you want to present your expert witnesses just dealing with traffic? Is that parking or?
One of the comments that we were prepared to address had to do with parking. I think that the applicant has improved a bad situation. I'm not sure they've made a bad situation a good situation. They've reduced the number of compact spaces here, and they're presuming that 39% of the people that would park cars here at the ratio of just under 1.1% are going to have compact cars, and that's not consistent with the way we designed it. If you would like Ms. Spratt, our engineer, to explain how they designed projects and the minimum parking ratios, she could do that right now if you want her to speak directly to that issue.
Yeah, well, it may be an appropriate time. Let me just ask Ms. Corcoran one question. Ms. Corcoran, who would be your next witness and what subject matter?
So Carrie Pike is actually up next to talk about that very issue. On the
Okay,
parking.
so why don't we do this, Mr. Galvin, if it's all right with everybody. Let's continue with Ms. Corcoran's presentation, hear from Ms. Pike, and then maybe it's an appropriate time to hear from your witness at that time. So it'll be consistent with the testimony that's being given.
Okay.
That fine with you?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just ask one follow-up question with respect to Mr. Valdez, and that is whether there's any other person present at this hearing virtually who has any questions regarding Mr. Valdez's testimony. Bev, do we have anyone present?
I'm so sorry, I was on mute. We do not.
Okay, great. Then let's, Ms. Corcoran, why don't you present your next witness?
All right, so next up will be Carrie Pike from Howard Stein Hudson to discuss the parking and traffic memo.
Right,
Ms.
so
Good, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. It's good to see you again.
thank you very much. Just a few things about parking. So we did provide much more detail, as Mr. Bomer referred to in a several page memo, giving more detail about how the parking would operate. Just to summarize, we have 92 units. More than half of those are studios and 1-bedrooms. And so potentially that plays better with the ratio of compact spaces. We have reduced the number of compact spaces. And you can see there in table 2 on the screen. On the surface, in the surface parking, most of those spaces are standard size. Only 2 of those are compact. In the garage, there are more compact spaces. And we do have a total of 104, which is just over 1 per unit. We did also take a look around at some other towns in Massachusetts, and there's a kind of a wide range of what is allowed by zoning bylaws across the Commonwealth. And we saw everything from 25, as Milton has, to a lot of towns kind of in the, there's a number of towns that have a 30 or 33%. And then we did find a couple, Needham and Amherst, that allow 50% of compact spaces that we we're going in the right direction in terms of the number of spaces, and we're comfortable with that. The team is comfortable with that from a marketing perspective as well, just from the perspective of, you know, the attendance that we're expecting to have. Next one, please, Jen. Moving on to, I just want to quickly run through a few of the pieces from the auto turn analysis that we did of the garage. We did provide, this was multiple sheets of the auto turn of both the garage and the surface lot. This is for the garage, and this is an add-on to CAD that basically allows you to take different sizes of vehicles and maneuver them through an area. And we actually had a number of back and forth with Frank on how the garage is laid out in places that we tweaked things to make it work better and to you know, change those numbers as I just talked about on the prior slide. So this shows the compact car maneuvering in the center aisle. Frank also mentioned that we do have a one-way circulation pattern. This is for the below grade garage. And so you can see the little cars kind of pulling in and out of spaces and how they maneuver there in that center aisle. And if you could go to the next one, please, Jen. And then on the left side diagram here, this shows the cars coming in, and this is a regular passenger car now, not a compact car, pulling in to the angled spaces there that are on the left side. And also, and then on the right side of the screen, you see the cars pulling into the angled spaces as well as to the parallel spaces and then backing out of the spaces. So you can see that they can maneuver. Again, those spaces along the wall are for a regular passenger car as opposed to a compact. They're not compact spaces. So we did, you know, have a lot of back and forth and test these. And like I said, a lot of back and forth with Frank about, you know, the layout and just the ways we could tweak it to make it work and to get, you know, to increase the number of regular spaces that meet the town's dimensional requirements that are not compact. I think that's my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. Let me see if either Mr. Ballmer or Sean Reardon have any questions on the traffic and parking issues.
I have one quick question. So Carrie, first of all, thank you. That memo was great. I thought it laid out a lot of the issues and made really clear, you know, some of the concerns we had. Same thing with the parking layout, much better attempt this time. So, you know, I concur with your findings. The one thing I'm curious about is you had some other auto turns for the upper garage, the open parking level. And that shows the right turns coming in from Franklin Street invariably require an entering vehicle to cross over into the opposing lane. What were your plans for sort of mitigating that potential conflict?
I mean, I'm not sure that we necessarily have one aside of, you know, potentially some mirrors and things like that to allow someone to see if someone is coming, like if there's a truck entering or a car even entering from Franklin Street turning in and they have to cross over. You know, you'd see this in a lot of kind of tight urban areas. Like I know we see it in some of our downtown projects, especially that you end up having sort of a two-way ramp, if you will, although this isn't a ramp, it's at surface grade, but you end up having a two-way ramp that, you know, we rely on the mirrors and things like that to make sure that there's not someone coming around the corner as you're coming in.
Are you familiar with any systems that could maybe, like, could it be like a light or something that warns an entering vehicle if a car is exiting? Is that something that might be doable?
I think there are systems like that. Yeah, we could look into that, I think,
Yeah.
Jen.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, that's really my only outstanding concern with regard to the parking, aside from just the practicality of it, which I think we've been over, is just the fact that, you know, there's a lot of vehicles that are coming in, making a right-hand turn as you come up Franklin Street that, because of the angle of the driveway, because of the size of the building, they're not going to know whether someone's coming at them exiting. So it would be nice to have some sort of a warning system or a light that forewarns them that there's somebody coming out.
Okay, we can look into that.
Great, thanks, Mr. Reardon. Let me ask Jeff Mullen. Do you have any questions of Ms. Pike? Oops, did you get him?
No, I missed.
I'm sorry.
I don't know why there's a bug in my house in the middle of January. It makes no sense whatsoever.
So on the, how many employees do you expect to be parking here?
That may be a question for Jen. I'm not sure that we have.
So there won't be any full-time employees. There will be a full-time manager, so 1 or 2 employees. Sorry, I don't know why I said there wouldn't be any full-time employees. There will be 1 building manager who will probably split their time between that and another property. There'll also be a 24-hour on-call maintenance, so the maintenance person may be in there at a given time, but won't be full-time in the building.
So I'm concerned about the availability and the guest parking, which is down to 8. If I understand the memo correctly, there's 8 guest parking. That includes 2 accessible spaces and 1 van accessible space. So if you don't need an accessible space, you're down to 5. And that's for guests and employees. And it seems to me that the biggest risk of using the available street capacity, which is a local concern that's been expressed by the neighbors, is with the guests. So I'm not confident that that will work. And I'm wondering, it says in the memo that there are enforcement mechanisms proposed, and residents will be made aware of limited guest parking. Efforts will be made to encourage guests of residents to utilize rideshare or non-auto modes such as public transit, biking. How is that going to be done?
How are we going to encourage people? I think, I mean, if you're
Talking
aware,
about guests.
if you're aware that you live in a place that doesn't have, ample parking, say South Boston, for example, right? People are more likely, I think, to not try to, park a car there if it's not guaranteed they can find a space. So I think the scarcity is one way to kind of discourage people from, having a huge party with a bunch of guests. So that would be one way, just the scarcity itself being kind of a discouragement.
Yeah, I know, I understand the psychology of it. What I'm wondering, the memo says that efforts are going to be made by the applicant to encourage guests of residents to utilize rideshare. I'm wondering if there's a plan for that.
I think that was just from a management perspective. When people are moving in, starting, we go into kind of the explaining to prospective residents the parking situation. So even before you lease a unit, you're made aware of the scarcity of guest parking and the fact that there will only be a limited number. The other thing, just on the ADA accessible spaces on the surface lot. So those might be for residents. We're not sure yet, if a resident requires special accommodation. So I don't want to necessarily take those out of the, potential guest count. But we think, given 92 units, I think that, 8 extra spaces we think that's substantial.
I don't think you have 8 though, Jen. I think you've got 5, at least according to the data. And then you've using some of them for employees. So the question is how many guest spaces there really are. It feels to me like there's a maximum of 5 and probably less if some of them are devoted to employees.
Wait, so really quickly, where are you getting 8 and 5? Because we have
says 8
12
additional spaces for guest employee parking. Guest/employee parking. So that's 8. Then it says 2 surface lot includes 2 accessible spaces and 1 van accessible spaces, which gets you down to 5.
Let me, sorry if I could interrupt for just a moment. I think this might be my error, Mr. Mullen. I think I may have inadvertently put an extra indent, and that particular bullet should be out 1, but let me just confirm that. In other words, the surface lot accessible spaces are not related to the spaces for guests/employee parking, which is what the way the memo is written currently, because I have it open on my screen. That's the way it reads. Yeah. And I think I may have put 1 extra indent where there shouldn't be 1. So let me just double check that.
Okay.
Yeah, because just going by the numbers that are here, so we have 12 excess spaces outside of the 1-to-1. With, if you want to assume that three of the guest spaces will be the ADA ones, so then you're down to 9. And then, the one space that would bring you down to 8 would be maybe, an employee or something.
Yeah, but then you need to accommodate the 2 that for the pickup and drop off and 2 for the move in and move out.
Right. So the move in, move out, those will be like a fifth, sometimes, most of the time, those will be available aside from when people are moving out. So I mean, it's a shared parking situation, but I mean, I see your point in,
It's not broken down. I mean, it's just my reaction is it's not broken down well. I think the strategy needs to be sharpened, and I don't trust the guest parking. I think that we shouldn't rely on the guest parking. Now, that may or may not matter, but I'm just pointing out that I think there's an issue there. All of that leads me to, there's no comment in the memo about transportation demand. Yeah, I know that we talked about this before, and I'm wondering if you're not going to have a transportation demand program for the residents, and whether you've given any thought to that.
No, I believe we are. We just, the parking memo was focused on parking, but everything that we had put into our traffic impact study, which the town's peer reviewer, Jeffrey Dirk, agreed with, all of those things are still on the table.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Have you thought about some type of incentive program where people who opt out of parking, that is, don't take the parking, get a subsidized T-Pass on the condition that they use it? Have you thought about something like that?
We did consider, I think, earlier in the process when I believe it was brought up and we were talking about other TDM. I mean, the other incentive is that you're going to be saving money because it does cost money to park. So that's, a built-in incentive. But we would obviously entertain, if you forfeit your parking space, a certain amount of time on a Charlie card or whatever it may be, and we're open to suggestions on that.
I think, I don't know that the town has done this, but I think given the limitation of parking, and I think the unit mix lends itself to fewer parking spaces. I think providing an incentive for people to opt out of parking could be interesting and could work here. You incent people to get on that bus and get people in the habit of taking the bus to either spot, or subsidize bike share, or subsidize some type of blue bike, to Wollaston. I feel like this is a good spot to do that. I mean, maybe Tim Zawinski has thoughts on it, but I would be, I'd have more confidence in the low parking ratio, which generally I support because I think we have too much parking generally, but I understand the culture of Milton. So if you're going to do it, this is a good site to do it at. So all of my questions were leading to some type of creative incentive for people to opt out of parking and lower the parking demand here. Because my sense is that that's at the top of the local concern that's being expressed. It also, it also helps with simple traffic. It's not just a parking issue; it's also a roadway capacity issue. I understand that it's small, but every as Kerry knows, every bit counts. So those are my thoughts and suggestions.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Let me take you at your suggestion. Tim Zawinski, do you want to weigh in on the parking issue and the incentive for the low parking ratio and how to deal with that? Does that make sense to you, and do you endorse that type of plan?
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. I don't disagree with anything that Mr. Mullen said. I think that this is as good a site from a kind of amenity walkability perspective to have a more aggressive parking ratio. But that said, there are kind of wrinkles. I think the guest parking question, you can, when you're making the investment of renting a high quality apartment in a high quality location, you're gonna make a certain decision about whether you have a car. If you're just visiting, you might think more about driving just because. So you really do want to get that right, and make sure that you have effective strategies in place. And I think a win-win from that perspective would be, to Mr. Mullins' point, a really good transportation demand management program, which there have been proposals in their traffic study, which I think are good. But I do think having a little bit more detail about are you going to provide that incentive, and offer that really clear trade-off between, all right, you're not going to get a parking space, we're going to give you a T-pass. I mean, it's the carrot and the stick approach that you can really demonstrate, like, look, we've done everything that we can to get this thing right. I do agree with Jen. It's kind of tough for people to put themselves in this headspace, but if you're not going to get a spot, you're less apt to bring your car. If you're going to live in a space where parking is going to be a day-to-day struggle, that's real. We see that borne out in a lot of places. But to be able to demonstrate, for everybody that, like, okay, we've got the stick in the form of scarcity. Here's a carrot in the sense of we're going to give you a subsidized T-pass or some other type of incentive to use an alternative mode. I think is a really good idea, and I would encourage the applicant to put together a detailed proposal for that.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate your comments. Mr. Gray, do you have any questions of Ms. Pike on parking?
No, I don't. I think Mr. Mullins covered my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nick. And Mr. Galvin, do you have any questions of Ms. Pike regarding parking issues?
I don't have any questions, but as a part of my presentation, I'd like to address some of the issues that she raised and that have been commented on.
Okay, do you prefer to do that now, or would you rather wait till the end?
We're ready when you're ready for us.
Okay, well, let's do your parking presentation right now. It seems like a convenient time to do it.
Okay, the board may recall back to the very first meetings, I displayed some photographs that were taken along Franklin Street. And I'm glad it came up tonight. One of the board members, I think Mr. Mullen, raised it, what happens when a vehicle parks over the curb. What's occurring is that along Adams Street, there isn't enough loading spaces because the parking space, people are parking in front of the businesses and restaurants and offices on Adams Street, and there's no space for loading. So what the businesses and restaurants are doing is they're having their loading occurring on Franklin Street, and those trucks are straddling the sidewalk and jutting out into Franklin Street. And the renderings in this particular case, make it look like Franklin Street is this wide expanse of 30 feet of paving that vehicles can park on both sides and two vehicles could pass internally. And if you were to ask my clients, the residents of East Milton, they'll tell you that that's just not possible. When a vehicle that's unloading or waiting to unload to one of the businesses that it's servicing is parked up on the sidewalk, which occurs here, and there's a vehicle parked on the opposite side of the street where there's permitted parking, the roadway is only wide enough for one car to pass. And that was what I demonstrated with some of those early photographs, and I could display them again. And that kind of gets to the heart of one of the issues for us, and that is parking on this site. We certainly appreciate the applicant's efforts to locate on this property as much parking as possible. But if you go to the bylaw itself, our bylaw in here, the table of parking requirements has no fewer than 1.5 space per unit. And this is just over 1. And I think Mr. Mullins is exactly correct. There isn't ample room for guests to come here and park. And what that means is those guests will park in the neighborhood. And not only do we have insufficient guest parking, but we are displacing 32 leased spaces that run to the Abbey Park restaurant. And I read Attorney Freeman's memo, and I certainly don't disagree with him. This was a requirement of the planning board, not the zoning board, that parking spaces are required here. But when you displace parking and you don't have enough other parking, I think it's very logical to assume that that parking will end up in the residential neighborhood, which is, it's a fairly dense residential neighborhood. Most of the properties have a driveway. Some of them only have one-car garages. Some of them have one garage space, but they are heavily dependent on parking along the street in front of their homes. And if that is impacted in any way, shape, or form, that's a problem for us. The other issue that I raise is principally with the garage parking. And I know they're creating, they've reduced the amount of compact spaces, but 60% of that garage space is compact parking spaces. And the turning ratio, moves that you saw in the, I think 3 of the 4 aisles are by compact cars. And I think it's fairly logical to assume that, and I've done it myself, and it's probably not the right thing to do because your larger car is going to be impacted, but there's nothing they can do to preclude a standard size car from parking in a compact space. And we all know that people never pull fully in. And as a matter of fact, there's traffic bumper stops installed in a lot of places to try to encourage people to park fully in. But the reality is, if a car that is a standard size car attempts to park in a compact space, that would leave a foot between that car and the next vehicle, and you can't open a door with 1 foot. I'm not small enough to do that. I don't think many people are. And I think we're kidding ourselves, because it's going to be a very, very difficult movement for a standard size car to back in and out of a space when the space with which they can back out is not as wide or as long as the car, because there's about 19 feet in the drive aisle. You just can't make the moves. And all this goes to the point is, if it becomes so inconvenient and that people won't use these spaces or can't use these spaces, again, these people will reluctantly end up in our neighborhood, and that's a problem for us. So I know that Ms. Spratt can tell you how many projects they've designed that are 40B in nature. They always design with 1.5 parking spaces in mind. I'm happy to have her explain that to you. They never go to one spot per unit, which is functionally what this is, because there'd be no room for guest parking. Their ratio here includes the 5 or 8 spots for guests. So we're really we're kidding ourselves if we think that there's enough parking and there's not going to be an adverse impact to the neighborhood. And I don't disagree with many of the things that Attorney Freeman said in his memo, because it was the planning board that either didn't require something or basically imposed a requirement, but nothing changes the fact that 32 parking spaces for Abbey Park are going to be displaced. And that displacement causes the problem, and it's this project, not Abbey Park, that's the source of that problem. So we figured that at some point people would come to the recognition that there wasn't enough parking to have a project with this type of density without causing an adverse impact to the neighborhood, and they would significantly reduce the scope of this project, and they haven't. I certainly don't deny that they've reduced it from 101 to 92, 9 units. I think that the board needs to have a peer review consultant with the financial ability to test their theories. And I remember saying this when I spoke to you the last time. But again, this is a project that is not sufficiently parked. It doesn't make adequate provision for parking. And there's only one group of people that's going to ultimately suffer that consequence, and it's the neighborhood.
So have you completed your comments?
On, as to
Or do you
parking,
want Ms.
as-
Spratt to actually testify, or are you content with your representation?
If Ms. Spratt were to testify and she's here and she could explain to you, you just don't design a project with this density with that few parking spaces. And they've never designed them that way. They're always at about 1.5. And, you know, it's not like there is a readily convenient bus station that's close. Of course, there's a bus at the end of Bassett Street. But, you know, it's not that convenient, and it's not the type of public transportation I think is being vastly overstated. And Mr. Mullins' idea was as great an idea as I've heard. You know, perhaps they should subsidize their rents here to encourage public transportation. But the reality is, with the amount of rent that people are going to pay here, they're going to expect to park there, and when they can't, they'll be in our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Galvin, for your comments. Miss Carrie Pike, do you want to comment on Mr. Galvin's perception of the parking issues?
I mean, I guess I just will respectfully say that I disagree with many of his statements. This is an urban project, and the client is our client, and our team will be marketing to folks who, have an expectation of not necessarily, and as Jen said earlier, as they're renting out to folks, the parking situation is going to be explained to folks. I don't think we're averse to the idea of some sort of incentive, as Mr. Mullen suggested. We did have a TDM program outline that I think we talked about sometime last year. I don't remember which meeting it was, but we did discuss that in previous testimony. I'm sure that I'm probably missing some points, but I guess we've shown that in the garage that the parking is maneuverable. Mr. Reardon had agreed that we had made strides in the correct direction, as we were talking about that during Mr. Valdez's testimony, and mine as well. So, and I think the project team is comfortable with this project being marketable as it is. I mean, this is not a project that's out in a suburban neighborhood where you need 1.5 plus parking spaces per unit.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. Let me just offer this, if in the course of the hearing as we're going on, if you have any further thoughts that you want to state or make, don't hesitate to put your hand up, and we'll be happy to hear from you. I think we're not going to play get you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I think Peter Freeman has his hand up.
Thank you.
Mr. Freeman, do you want to be heard?
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. I was back to hear most of Mr. Galvin's comments. Just a few additional things to what Kerry just said. Number one, be mindful of in the package the vision plan, and Judy Barrett is here, and she prepared that. I think mostly she was the town's consultant, not your consultant. It's contemplated that there is going to be a garage, a public garage, I presume. And it really is a town East Milton issue. The problem, despite what Mr. Galvin said, is not being created by this project. Yes, there are 32 spaces, but I showed very clearly, and I appreciate Bob agreeing with what I said in my memo, in terms of it's not this project's obligation. The one restaurant with the 32 parking spaces won't be able to operate unless it goes back to the to the planning board. I believe it's the planning board, and makes adequate alternative arrangements. So it's very clear that it's not an obligation of this project, nor, as I said in my memo respectfully, that it's appropriate for this board to make a condition to that effect. I think Mr. Chewinski, I've spoken to him, and He certainly can speak for himself, but I do believe that he and others, I think Miss Barrett too, would agree that really it's a townwide or an East Milton responsibility for the town to address, because it's been an ongoing situation. We are not creating the situation. A few other points, the concerns about compact spaces, I might have heard incorrectly because I was just coming back, but I think that Mr. Galvin said that we've got 60% compact spaces. So Jen or Kerry, correct me, but I think your presentation showed we now have 39%. Is that right, Jen?
39% across the site, yeah, and 59%
so-
basically, yeah.
Right. So in any case, that's the percentage. And there are multiple ways that management will control it. It's absolutely in their interest to control it. And, they will have a garage key pods or whatever they're called these days to open the garage. There is absolutely management that will be on site to inspect. And if tenants are parking standard size cars in the compact spaces, it's going to be real simple to find out. And they will be told to change, and they'll either be evicted or they'll be towed or whatever it is. So there's multiple ways, and it's addressed in the parking plan. I believe that those situations, which are practical, I understand, but those situations can readily be dealt with by management, and they will be. There'll also be a provision in the lease, that says you are subject to, fines and ultimately eviction if you don't abide by the parking rules. So there's just multiple ways that situation can be addressed. And the final thing that I will leave you with for the moment, and this is often honestly not remembered and overlooked often by the boards, I don't mean you in particular, but also sometimes by us folks, attorneys and project developers advocating for the project. Don't forget that the legal standard for 40B is you can only impose something based on a local concern if that local concern is so serious that it outweighs the local and regional need for affordable housing. And we basically are in a situation where there's a presumption that the affordable housing need outweighs the local need because the town hasn't achieved any of the 10% standards, et cetera, or goals, et cetera. So that being the case, of course, and this whole process has been very thorough, and I respect the board and a great job by excellent peer review consultants, which, we've responded to. I won't, go back to all of that. We've been covering that tonight, but you have to keep that in mind that you can't, do something, that makes it impossible to go forward with a project or substantially alters it unless the concern you have outweighs the housing need. And I respectfully submit, I just don't think that that's the case. But again, I'm not weighing just on some legality, but it's a very important legal principle. That's the whole basis of 40B. But more importantly, from a practical viewpoint, as I said, because you folks have been very thorough and professional, as have your professional consultants, and will simply adequately address it. It's not going to create an issue. Oh, there's one very other important factual thing. I can't tell you how many projects the McKenzie engineer has done, and maybe she has never had less than 1.5. We're taught from day one, lawyers, that we never say always or never. I can tell you from direct experience that many of the projects of the close to 200 I've been working on for many years, especially the recent ones with the trend towards mass transit, public transportation, reducing auto emissions and reducing cars on the road, that the projects, very few these days, other than suburbs that really are not near any kind of transportation or not close to the city, very few of them have 1.5. Most of them are now coming in between 1, and this one is 1.1, and 1.3 or 1.34. So we're right in the range where it would be for a setting in a community in such close proximity to Boston with the bus and all of that. So, that's another important point. So I'll end there and thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Freeman. We appreciate. Let me just ask whether there's any person out there, a member of the public or otherwise, who has a question regarding the parking issue that we've been discussing here. Bev, could you let me know if there's any such person present?
There are no hands up. Another panelist has one though, Susan Spratt.
Oh, Ms. Spratt.
Hi,
Yes.
how are you? I would just like to respond to Attorney Freeman. I currently permitted 3 projects. Granted, they, 2 of which started as 40Bs, but ended up being a change during the process of an overlay district. 2 of those are in Wellesley, they have greater than a 1.5 to 1 ratio. The other one is in Weymouth, which is on Washington Street. Granted, it's not a 40B, but that one provides a minimum of 1.5 to 1 per the town zoning regulations. The 2 in Wellesley, one is directly across the street from a tea stop. The other one is less than a 10-minute walk from that tea stop. The one at Linden Street, which is across the street from the tea stop, is within 5-minute walking distance to downtown Linden Square. So it does provide all the amenities that you're arguing that you can provide a 1.1% ratio. But like I said, I just permitted 3 that provided 1.5 to 1. Granted, they weren't 40B projects, but we did provide 1.5 to 1 ratio, and they were multi-level structures with a garage parking facility.
Great.
In all 3 of them.
Thank you for weighing in. I appreciate your comments.
It just briefly, if I may, no, I respect that, but that's a handful of projects. I'm in no way intending to go tit for tat and pull out the 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 that I've had recently that have less. And to a degree, every locus is different. I certainly grant you that, but this is much more of an urban, close to the city, and some transportation. And the other thing which really ties, the question of the number of spaces in addition to the compact is simply that this can still be controlled by management, because they're not going to allow excess parking. They're going to have lease requirements with the tenants as to the number of cars, and I believe where they can park. I don't mean to misspeak. I don't know if we've decided yet if they're going to be assigned spaces, but it's going to be very closely regulated. It's not in the developers and the managers' interest, and they're all going to be related. This is an experienced company that knows how to manage properties, thousands, and not necessarily this exact company, but all their experience over the years and portfolio. So, it will be absolutely satisfactorily managed through management. And so we're just confident that it's not going to create a problem. Thanks.
Okay, great, Mr. Freeman. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I just add one? I do have a question, I guess, for the applicant and the town. There are approximately 32 spaces that are going to be displaced with this development. What assurances are you going to give the surrounding neighbors that their existing parking is not going to be actually taken over by the people who are going to use the restaurants, the businesses, or maybe overflow parking from somebody has a party and you only have 8 visitor spaces? What assurances are you going to give the neighborhood that displaced parking is not going to negatively affect them?
Happy to answer you and give you an ironclad assurance. As I already said, I already addressed that, but I'm happy to repeat it. I believe it's Abbey Park, under their own permit, and I believe, although we can't make any factual findings because it's in process, but I believe that they're looking for alternate parking, that's not on the street, obviously. But they simply won't be able to operate, as I said very thoroughly in my memo, having read all the decisions very thoroughly. I shouldn't say I said thoroughly, I said specifically. When this project is built and they're displaced from those parking spaces, they can't simply keep operating and have the result that you're concerned about cars for that restaurant just looking elsewhere in the neighborhood. They have to go back to the planning board to modify their permit and satisfy the planning board as to what their alternative plan is. It's simply etched in stone. That's the decision. They have to comply with it, and they know that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Freeman. Bev, is there anybody else out there who has the question on parking issues?
There is, we have Bob Kelly. Mr. Kelly?
Mr. Kelly, are you there? Hello?
Yes, hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. So why don't you just identify yourself for the record, Mr. Kelly, and we'll give you the floor.
Sure, thank you. Robert Kelly, 65 Franklin Street. 2 quick points. Number one, this notion of a future garage in East Milton Square, that's just pure speculation. So I would urge the board not to give that much weight, if any. We have to deal with the facts as they are right now. And as Milton residents, you all realize that East Milton Square is unique in its density and traffic and congestion. It's probably the most congested part of Milton. Number two, I just want to remind the board that you don't need reminding that Milton is a suburb, contrary to what we've heard tonight from some of the experts. This is not an urban center, and East Milton Square it's 2 blocks. You blink and you miss it if you happen to get 2 green lights. With regard to the public transportation that's been so highly touted, I've lived here a decade. I frequently take the 2:15 bus to Ashmont. I work in downtown Boston, and I have never in 10 years gotten on that bus outside Brugger's or gotten off it at the post office with more than one person. The reality is that bus runs once every 35 to 40 minutes. And, I just want to make the point that this is not like some express bus that jumps on the pike and you're in downtown Boston in 10 minutes. It's a good hour door to door from East Milton Square to anywhere right near a T stop in downtown Boston. So let's not bank on everybody, hopping on the magic bus. It's a long slog that does not work for most people. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mr. Kelly. Appreciate your comments. Bev, is there anybody else that wants to speak to regarding parking issues?
Yes, we have Andrew.
Yeah, hello.
Andrew D'Amato. Why don't you identify
Yes.
yourself, Mr. D'Amato?
It's Andrew D'Amato, 26 Pear Street, right here in East Milton Square. I'm a little confused. Maybe somebody can clarify. Is there going to be a full-time 24/7 manager on this property? I mean, Ms. Cochran said there's a part-time person who shares this responsibility, and yet there's this talk of someone constantly monitoring the parking, towing people and such. So just can someone clarify who is going to be from the management company on this property, and what are the responsibilities, and when are they on this property?
Ms. Corcoran, do you want to take a run at Mr. D'Amato's question?
Sure, yeah, we haven't, determined the exact specifics yet of that. I mean, it would obviously be a function of, what the task at hand is, whether we, need to monitor the parking 24/7, maybe towards the beginning we will. There is 24/7 maintenance, and also discussed in the parking memo is that we'll, enlist a tow company as well. So if, the manager isn't there to be looking at, checking everyone's stickers around the clock in those 37 spaces on the surface lot, there will be a tow company, and they'll be posted that, you park at your own risk if you are not authorized to be parking there, the same as any other lot in the square that is for single use.
Yeah, Mr. Freeman was saying, though, that, if there was a full-size car in a compact spot, that wouldn't be allowed. Management would be all over it. I think, what I'm seeing here is a little overstatement of, the kind of control you're going to be able to have, especially if you do not have a full-time person there 24/7. And by the sounds of it, you don't have that.
Yeah, so to clarify on Mr. Freeman's comments, so I believe that Mr. Galvin was referring to somebody with a full-size vehicle parking in a compact space in the garage. That wouldn't happen. I mean, that would be against the rules, because all the space in the garage will be for residents only. They'll be reserved and numbered. So if you're an owner of a compact vehicle, you'll be assigned a compact space. If you have a standard vehicle, you'll be assigned a standard space. And if you take your neighbor's parking space, then you might have more issues than just the manager. That's not really the community that we want to foster. So that, I believe Mr. Galvin's comment about, someone parking in the wrong spot would be a bit moot.
So those assigned spots will be assigned to people, and they will have to have a compact car if they are in a compact space. In other
Yes,
words,
and
they would
the-
have to register the car. You're not going to register an SUV to someone who has a compact space, or you're not going to register a full sedan to somebody who has a compact space.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification there. I think one issue was also mentioned that I thought just practically didn't really make sense to me was this analogy of going into South Boston, or for that matter, the North End, two places I frequently visit. And yes, parking is difficult there, very difficult. But generally speaking, I find that if I can find a parking space 4 blocks from my destination, that's successful. And I think that would probably be the same thing if you were going to be a visitor to the residence, and or if there was a party there, you would pull in and say, geez, there's nothing right here on Adams Street. Let me zip around a corner down Bassett. Maybe we'll go down Franklin. No, yeah, go down the street a little bit. There's a couple of open spots, and that's where you're going to park, and that's going to be a residential area. And I think that is going to be an ongoing problem. And I firmly believe that 5, you could call it 8 spots for guests is inadequate. But that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mr. D'Amato. Appreciate your questions and your presence. Is there anybody else there who has a question on traffic and parking?
Jim Coyle has his hand up.
Okay, good evening. Some of the previous speakers, Mr.
I'm sorry, Mr. Coyle, would you be kind enough to identify yourself?
Oh, sure.
We'll have it for the
Jim
record.
Coyle. I live on Bumpton Street, and I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 7, where this project is located.
Great.
One comment, I've seen many times where the disputed parking area that was talked about for every park is also for Navara. In fact, they post a sign there that has the names of both restaurants. I'm not familiar with the legal situation on that, but that's the reality of what's been happening out there. So that's one thing. And then the other comment, there was a question earlier with Mr. Reardon about the danger really of going in and out of parking garages. I used to work in downtown Boston. I've been in many parking garages there, and the only ones that have a traffic light or signals are the old ones that have converted some other old building. The new ones don't have that. And I can give you some examples. I could present those to the boards, but I think that's totally unrealistic to even think about having a light or something, especially with the very narrow parking aisles and having to angled parking, having to be back out of the air. I've parked in maybe a dozen different parking garages in Boston in the last 10 years. And I think that's too dangerous and should not be allowed on this project, especially with the immediate neighborhood. It is a loading zone because Milton hasn't provided a loading zone. It's been neglected for a long time. So I think and the parking garage issue here, those are hypothetical pie in the sky things that are in that report that are shown out there now. It'll take decades for something like that to happen. So it's just unrealistic to think that'll ever be happening. So the parking situation is a major, major problem here. And I fully support what Mr. Galvin presented earlier. And I would ask Mr. Reardon to look into that. His comments about safety, they're in and out of this garage in a lot more detail than has happened so far. I also have a question. What is the current height of the opening to the courtyard? Is that still 10'3"? Or has it been increased to a more height there?
The parking, the entrance into the courtyard is still 10'3".
Okay, then my response to that, the standard height for a UPS truck is 10'6". And if we're gonna avoid more congestion, that's still a problem. Right now, the height into the courtyard, I understand the width has been widened and there's a sidewalk down there per Mr. Reardon's suggestion, but I think the mix of vehicles is a big problem, and the height of some of the vehicles here. I live on a little street a couple of blocks away from this project with about 7 or 8 houses. We easily have a dozen vehicles, FedEx, UPX, Amazon, you name it, we have them, you know, and this project here is going to have 90-something families in it with 100 cars. The population of this building alone is probably the same population as Bassett and Franklin and some other streets all combined. So you're like putting 350, 400 people in an area. East Milton only has about 2,700 residents right now. This is a big change in what's happening in Milton here. And I think the impact on the town hasn't been studied seriously enough at all here right now. And I think some serious rethinking needs to be done before anything is approved here. So, you know, I think the parking situation is totally unrealistic. That's my 2 cents for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Coyle. We appreciate. Bev, is there anybody else out there who wants to be heard on parking?
There is. Mr. or Mrs. Shaughnessy?
Hi, good evening. Shane Shaughnessy, my husband and I reside at 30 Franklin Street. I'm making sure that you can hear me because I've been having computer issues with my okay.
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I believe it was Miss Pike that had the drawings of the garage with the cars up. Was that you? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
We're just wondering if possibly in the future, maybe the next meeting, if there's a way that you can provide drawings with cars that are going into and out of the entrances and the exits with all different types of vehicles. It looks like they were just like the compact vehicles going in and out. You know, we live right here. We're on the corner of Franklin and Bassett. And I know like the sidewalk has been widened and all of that, but the delivery trucks, it's going to be an issue. And I literally had to walk out into Franklin Street the other day because I couldn't get up on the sidewalk because the trucks were parked on the sidewalk. So if you're having all of these trucks parking along, and I know that's not your responsibility and the town needs to take care of that, but we're just wondering if there's a way that you can kind of show us how, if you're having cars going in and out of there, they're not going to be all these mini cars. They're going to be Amazon delivery trucks. They're going to be SUVs. That's kind of what we're interested in seeing, if that's possible, that you can show us renderings of that.
Mr. Leonard, is it all right if I respond to that?
Yes, of course it is.
We did actually do that, and I only just showed a couple of the drawings, but there is a full set, including different sizes of vehicles going in and out of the courtyard in the package that we submitted to the town last week. We just only showed a couple of the ones related to the garage. So that information is all there and available.
Okay, how would we access that? Or is that something that the neighborhood is able to see? Or is that just in with the town right now?
I will defer to Chair Leonard or perhaps Judy Barrett on, is that information available to the public?
I don't know why it wouldn't be.
It is.
Anything that's been submitted,
Yeah.
I know Tim and Bev have worked very hard to make sure that all those documents are posted on the board's webpage, where there's links to the various Chapter 40B developments. So I'm pretty sure anything that's been discussed tonight, if it's not there already, it will be shortly.
I would also like to add that if you would like a hard copy, if you want to just take a quick ride up to the Selectman's office at the Milton Town Hall, I will be happy to give one to you. It might be a little bit easier to read.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Shaughnessy. Bev, is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this parking issue?
We have Mr. Coyle.
He's already been heard.
I know.
Mr. Coyle, are you back again?
Now, I'm back at just one very quick question about the availability of documents here. Back in November, I sent a request into to Ms. Sutton about splitting up the documents. The applicant continued to submit plans in one large document that's very hard for the average person to manipulate, even open them up. It was suggested by Mr. Zawinski that I visit the office. I've been there twice. They told me there was going to be a full-size set of plans available for the public to view. That has never happened. So I'm very disappointed. The communication to the public has been very poor on the documents of this project. If you go to any other place around here, I've been doing this kind of work for 45 years, and we always submit full-size sets, as many as each town wants in every project, to make them available to the public here. And there are examples. You can go to go to Quincy, look at their website. The documents are all separate. The 8.5 by 11 documents, the full-size prints, the ants landscape plans are all separate documents that are easily acceptable. They are not easily accessible to the public in Milton. And I think that's needs to be corrected immediately.
Well, thank you for your comments, Mr. Coyle. Do we have anybody else present who wants to be heard?
We do not.
Okay, so let me ask Ms. Corcoran or Peter Freeman, do you have anybody else that you're going to be offering this evening?
Two quick things. My memory is probably foggy, so I'll let Jen answer that question in a second. But
Okay.
just real briefly, several people have mentioned my comment about the parking garage and the vision plan. I just want to make clear, I'm not in any way saying that it gives rise to a possibility that the board could find that there could be more parking available because there is a garage or might be. I'm not saying that. My point of raising that was simply that it shows that the town has already been acknowledging an existing parking situation in East Milton. And one of the things that it's working on through that vision plan is dealing with a way to accommodate it and address it. So my only point was that it further, I believe sincerely, buttresses our position that, our project isn't creating the problem and isn't responsible for solving it. Other than dealing with the, compact cars and the garage situation and those things, absolutely, we think we've addressed those. The only other thing real quick, because I think someone just mentioned, one of the speakers about Novara parking, patrons also parking at the present 40B locus. That may be true. I can't give any personal testimony on that. But the fact is, as shown by, again, my memo and the attached planning board, I believe it was, decision, very clearly, as a condition of their getting their restaurant permit, site plan review and permit, they had to have a garage, but it's on Church. I'm sorry, not a garage. That's on my mind. A parking lot that was created for their use on Church Street. So that's part of their decision. Their only required parking is on Church Street. Thank you. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add this evening, or have you completed your presentation? Jen, since I missed some things, from memory, I think that we have completed. If I'm missing something, Jen, you can tell me.
No, you were correct. The last item that we had was just you discussing the restaurant parking and the easement.
Right, but that's been yes, we were going to do that, but that's been addressed pretty much.
Yes.
Quite
hot topic.
Okay. The only other thing which I don't know if mentioned, somebody had asked, I don't know if it was one of Mr. Galvin's letters, and if it was mentioned when I was absent, I apologize, but the small commercial office next to, I think it's 524 Adams, there was a question about what about parking there? Well, it was actually discussed in that planning board or ZBA decision for the permit for that project, that actually it says specifically there is no parking available for that project and or for that building. And basically the decision said none is required. So again, we're not displacing anything there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. We appreciate that. So if the applicant has nothing further to offer, let me just check in with my fellow board members and ask Mr. Mullen, with respect to the applicant's presentation this evening, do you have any additional or last questions you want to ask? Or are you content?
I have several questions on the parking.
Great.
The memo that I got didn't have any attachments. So I haven't seen the special permits, the variances. The book that I picked up at Town Hall doesn't have those. So I know Mr. Freeman's referred to that a few times. I don't have those. So it would be good to get those. If I understand it correctly, I know that the memo deals with Abbey Park, Novara, and Lot A, but it really is just Abbey Park, isn't that right?
Is that a question to me, Mr. Mullen?
It's to the applicant.
No, first of all, I definitely submitted the attachments. I know they were part of the submission. I don't know what happened online or with the ZBA office. And of course, Bev's always been more than helpful and cooperative, but I can assure you that we did submit them.
Yeah, well, I don't have them. They're not in the
No.
book that I was given.
The issue with the fact that I see them, I'm just telling the public that we did that. Secondly, when you, who laughed at me?
No one laughed. I wanted to just be,
Yeah,
all due respect, Attorney Freeman, I got a package of all the books. All I did was unpack them. And this is Bev. And when Attorney Mullen and Attorney Leonard and Attorney Gray showed up, I simply took them out of the box and gave them what I received from Jen's delivery yesterday. I just wanted to put that on record.
no. As I said, that's why I said how great you've been. I wasn't in any way implying or stating any criticism whatsoever. And I apologize, somehow got messed up, but I know that I submitted them. I know the email submission, which is all I saw, that the email filing had it. But again, I wasn't saying that you shouldn't look at them. I was just trying to clarify for everyone's edification. Secondly, I think Mr. Mullen asked if the memo really addressed just Abbey Park. I mean, literally, obviously, it
That
addressed
wasn't my question.
Well, okay, that's why I'm asking. I misunderstood it then. If you're asking if the situation is mostly going to be created by Abbey Park, I suppose that's true. But again, we feel we've been responsive. So
Yeah, I don't think so. The question is it only Abbey Park that's leasing spaces at the lot?
yes,
Okay. So why are we even bringing Novara into it?
because Mr. Galvin asked that we examine all permits, and I believe Mr. Leonard at some point, which I understand, said that would be a good idea, and I was just trying to be thorough.
So there are 36 spaces on the lot.
I think it's 30. Is it 32 or 34?
The site plan shows 36. Your memo says that Abbey Park leases 32.
Right.
Assuming there's some float in there. Who else uses the lot?
I'd have to defer either Jen or Mr. Falcone if he's here.
The current offices that are on the site at 4 Franklin.
The building that's
Dentist,
being,
the orthodontist.
so that building's being demolished.
Exactly.
And is Abbey Park's lease, does that permit them to use the lot 24/7?
No, Mr. Freeman will have a little bit more detail on exactly what the permit states, but I believe it's for dinner service. So it's from 5 o'clock onwards.
The question was about the lease. I covered it, as you said in the memo, the lease. I think Mr. Mullen asked about the lease, which I did mention to Mr. Falcone, if you have that information. We have been told that, there's no issue with any breach on the landlord's part of the lease.
And I'm sorry, what's the answer to the question? Though? We just don't know.
What is the question?
Question is, when does Abbey Park have the right to park on the lot?
I don't know the time frame. I assume, but I don't know for sure that it's in keeping with the permit, which talks about spaces at, I believe, dinner time.
Well, the planning board does, but the Board of Appeals, according to the memo, it says at all material times during the operation of the premises as a public restaurant shall have under lease 40 off-street parking spaces.
Right, I'm talking about the specific condition in the site plan permit that talks about for Franklin Street, which is the 40B locus.
Can you,
Is it helpful if I read the language that's there? That's on the special permit? I have it in front of me.
no, I'm interested in the lease. I'm interested in the rights in the property. I'll tell you why I'm interested in it. And I understand that Mr. Freeman is saying that this board doesn't have subject matter jurisdiction. But what I've heard is that if we permit this project, Abbey Park has to close. And I'm wondering why that's not a local concern.
That's not what I said, Mr. Mullen, respectfully. What I said is
No,
exactly
let me just, that is what you said. I wrote it down.
what I said.
No, you said it twice, actually. You said Abbey Park is going to close. You said it
I
twice.
didn't say that, sir. If I interrupted you, I apologize, but I thought you were done. What I said was that
No, but
they are
let me just.
go back to the planning board.
I'm the member of the board,
Can't
sir.
satisfy the planning board, then they will close. Please do not misquote me.
This is my question. You said twice that Abbey Park has to close. There's no ifs, ands, about that. You also said that they will go back to the planning board, but you did say they will close.
The way I just said to you is what I said. I said, if they don't get the relief from the planning board to satisfy the planning board on parking, then they are subject to the decision of the planning board saying that you can't operate. That's what I said. I simply quoted the decision also.
We'll consider that you're clarifying your earlier statement, sir, which is fine. Can you tell me the status of Abbey Park's efforts to modify either their variance or their special permit or both?
I can't because I don't represent them and I haven't been in direct contact. I can ask Jen because I believe that they've been in touch with Vance, I forget his last name, the manager. I don't believe they've gone back to the boards yet, but I certainly, Jen can correct me if I'm wrong and elaborate, but that they've been exploring other parking options.
Yeah.
I believe that's already in process.
So we actually met with Vance Welch, who is the manager of Novara and Abbey Park, and Tim Serwinski on the 28th of December, and discussed, that was our third meeting with Vance, I believe, over the course of the project, just to make him aware of the fact that it will be, the responsibility of the proprietor to find alternative spaces. The way the special permit is written, the restaurant has within 30 days from the time at which the spaces are no longer available to them at 4 Franklin Street to find replacement spaces, or else they cannot operate. I also just received a quick call from Bob Falcone, who said that the hours that Abbey Park is allowed to use the spaces are Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. till closing, and then all day, all during business hours on Saturday and Sunday. And that's just kind of the reverse with the way the office parking works. The office uses are done at 5, Abbey Park and Novara somehow, because it's the same ownership, got kind of just grouped in there, whether colloquially or legally. But it's up to, the onus is on the restaurant operator to patrol that and make sure that employees aren't parking there, and that it's only restaurant customers who are parking there. I believe it's somewhere in the permit that they're supposed to ask people where they parked when they come into the restaurant.
So is this a local concern? Does the applicant believe this to be a local concern?
I didn't say it wasn't a local concern. I said I understand that it's a concern that we believe we've addressed to the extent appropriate for our project. What I says is that because it's a local concern doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Respectfully, I quoted essentially the 40B legal standard, that the local concern has to outweigh the local and regional housing need. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. You said in the memo that it's incumbent upon the town to address the East Milton Square parking concerns. My question is a different one. My question is, why is the concern not a local concern? The parking issue,
Sir, I think I may stop disengaging with you because you continue to misquote me. That's not what I said at the hearing tonight. I said it's to the extent it's a local concern, which I don't dispute. And if I was unclear before, I agree with you, sir. Of course, it's a local concern. What I said was you have to keep in mind the legal standard under 40B that the local concern that might require you to do something that we would find difficult or objectionable for the project, not because out of being difficult, we hope we can satisfy you in every respect, of course. And we've I think, done a good job on that. But what I said was the local concern has to outweigh the regional and local housing need. That's what I said. Thank you.
No, I know you said that. You can choose to answer my question or not, but you haven't answered it yet. My question is you said that the applicant respectfully believes it's incumbent upon the town itself to address the East Milton Square parking concerns. That's in your memo.
What is, of course, I know what my memo said. What is your question, sir?
My question is why would the town have to address this and not the applicant addressing the local concern that's been established?
Okay. First of all, we're addressing the concern that our project creates, which is parking for its residents and for potential guests and the pedestrian sphere, the streetscape, and public arena that Mr. Bomer has spoken about. In terms of parking, the reason that I say it's incumbent upon the town is because of what I've said, I believe, several times tonight. And again, I just a few minutes ago said that we cited and had the illustration from the vision plan to show that the town is already recognizing that they need to deal with it. That was my point when I stated that conclusion. I spoke to Mr. Cherwinski. I didn't quote him in my memo. He can choose to speak or not to speak. But when I spoke to him, I will tell you, and I'll put my hand on a Bible if you want me to, that says that he agreed that the town, and I'm not saying he made any comment about what you should do in the decision. I want to be very clear. I'm just saying that he did tell me that, yes, the town has a responsibility to deal with the parking in East Milton.
Okay, let me jump in here, and I think both of you have rather plainly and directly and sincerely stated your respective positions on parking and how it should be looked at from different perspectives. Jeff, do you have another question of the applicant on another issue?
No.
Okay, let me ask Nick Gray whether he has any questions on parking that he hasn't asked as of the present time.
Just one, and Mr. Freeman, I apologize if this is in your memo and I have missed it. With respect to the Abbey Park leases, the memo states that they lease 32 spaces at 4 Franklin Street. Who is the lessor on that lease?
I believe it's Falcone Properties.
And do the terms of that lease permit? What's the term of the lease? Do the terms of in terms of time?
You mean the duration of the?
Yeah, the duration. That's a better phrase for it. Thank you.
Yeah. I am told, and Jen, you can ask Mr. Falcone again, that I don't know what the original term lease is and how much is left, but clearly he has the right to terminate upon certain notice because I've been told, I know it's hearsay, but Mr. Falcone has told us, our team, that again, Vance, the manager, the operator of the restaurant, has been looking for other parking. So, that's where we're at. That's the factual situation.
I guess that's what I'm looking for is confirmation that the lessor has the right to repossess these spaces under the terms of the lease.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, I've spoken with Bob Falcone directly about that. So we have been assured. Yes.
Yeah, it's currently month to month, if that's helpful.
That is very helpful. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Does it make any sense, Mr. Freeman, to have a copy of that lease filed as an exhibit here, or at least marked for identification in some way, that because it's been referenced so much so that you have a nice clear record as to what the lease does contain.
Yeah, I mean, I can state that I don't have any objection. I'll have to, ask Mr. Falcone. He might want, the financial terms redacted, which is pretty commonplace in proceedings like this.
Yeah, that's very reasonable.
The only thing I would say, which, perhaps we're heading to that point soon, is, if the hearing is closed, I think it's perfectly legal to close it with the exception of having, that lease submitted as an additional exhibit, as you said.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that just there's been so many references to the parking issue and to Abbey Park and all of that. I'd hate to have, and who knows where this case is going to go, but I'd hate to have confusion in the ranks by not having that lease as part of the record. And I agree with you entirely, properly redacted so that any financial information, which really is irrelevant to our concerns here, be redacted out, and then at least we'll have a document if we write the decision that we can reference.
Sure.
Okay, so with all of that, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your materials, which I thought were very, very helpful here. And I think that what I'd like to do now, unless there's some objection to it, is Mr. Galvin did ask for some time at the end part of this meeting. He has talked about parking and all of that. But if he has any additional information that he'd like to offer, or if you have comments, that he'd be given the right to do that here and now.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. I would like to actually ask Susan Spratt, who's our professional engineer, who's looked at some other aspects of the plan, to maybe speak about that. And then after she's done speaking, I have some other comments that I'd like to make.
Okay, that's very fair. Ms. Spratt, welcome. Welcome.
Hi, welcome back. Yep. Once again, Susan Spratt from McKenzie Engineering. I just want to thank the board for allowing me to discuss some of the concerns that the East Milton Neighborhood Association has. We discussed parking. Another area of concern they have is stormwater management. And we recommend that if the board is to approve the project, that they might want to add as a condition that additional soil testing be performed at the location of where the infiltration system is proposed, just to confirm the assumptions that VHB has made in their analysis in regard to estimated seasonal high groundwater and the soil infiltration rate. We have used borings in the past as like the preliminary of the drainage, but during the final construction, we actually go out and do actual soil testing with a certified soil evaluator to determine the actual soil that is out there by, modeling and looking at the soil horizon. So we suggest that the town, the board put that as a condition if they were to approve the project. Second, from photographs provided by the neighborhood association, like we have Attorney Galvin has mentioned, it appears that during heavy rain events, down gradient flooding occurs. We recommend that maybe the applicant should review the existing closed drainage system within Franklin Street, similar to what they did for the existing sewer, just to determine if there are any deficiencies, and if so, provide recommendations to the town. They had mentioned maybe it's like a great capacity, maybe it's some clogged catch basins that need cleaning. Maybe there's just some pipes that, maybe need to be replaced. It's something that maybe the applicant would be willing to look at. He had mentioned about volume. It does appear in the drainage analysis that there is an increase for the 25 and 100-year storm events for the Franklin Street design point. He is correct where they don't really need to be mitigated per mass stormwater. It's just the peak rates. However, it does not comply with the town of Milton's rules and regulations for comprehensive permit applications, section 5, submittal requirements subsections O. And that states that the peak rates and volumes should be either decreased or matched. So essentially, they're not complying with the town's 40B comprehensive permit application. And they should evaluate that if the town will allow that increase, that it does not cause any off-site flooding due to the fact that photos have been provided that sort of document there are some issues, a down gradient. Pretty much those are the concerns that we have looked at. There was something, I was looking at the revised materials that VHB had submitted. They had done a probable high groundwater elevation calc using the Frimker method of 31.2, which puts them right at the 2-foot minimum. And like Attorney Freeman has suggested, we do recommend that a condition be also added, that a mounting analysis be provided, because it appears right now that they're right at the 2-foot minimum requirement for an infiltration system. And once again, I thank you for your time.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your comments and your brevity. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Ms. Spratt?
No questions, John.
Okay, Mr. Nick Gray, do you have any questions of Ms. Spratt?
Only if she wouldn't mind indulging me. I was trying to make notes and I didn't catch all of her third condition. If she could just repeat that for me, I apologize.
The first condition was about additional soil testing. We thought maybe a second condition could be that they.
The third one is the one.
It dealt with volume.
The volume, that's the
100-year flood
system or something.
Yeah, the mounting analysis, is that what we were talking about? The last one?
Whatever the last thing was.
Yes, that would be the bounding analysis that Attorney Freeman said that they are actually, VHB has said that the geotechnical engineer is in the process of providing that.
Okay.
And also, you probably should look at that the increase in volume will not cause any off-site flooding, because that does not comply with your permit applications for a 40B.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Nick, and certainly thank you, Ms. Spratt. Mr. Peter Freeman, no, let me do this. Well, let me stay with the town. Tim Zawinski, do you have any questions of Ms. Spratt?
No, I don't, sir.
Okay, great. Mr. Freeman, do you have any questions or comments regarding Ms. Spratt's testimony?
No, thank you, Mr. Leonard. Nope. Okay,
thank you. I appreciate very much. We go back to you, Mr. Galvin. Thank you for presenting, Ms. Spratt. Do you have any other further testimony or evidence that you want to present this evening?
Not through Mrs. Spratt. I do want to comment on a couple of other aspects of things that have been discussed tonight.
Okay, well, this is probably a good time to do so.
Okay, so
Mr. Chair, can I just interrupt real quick? I don't know if Sean Reardon has any questions for Ms. Spratt.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Reardon. With all due respect, I apologize. I should have asked you that. Did you have any questions of Ms. Spratt?
No, I will say I concur with most of her comments. I do have a question of the applicant regarding the fire access accommodations, if we get an opportunity to address that.
Well, let's do it right now, because we're then going to go to Mr. Galvin and we'll never get back to you.
Okay, so we did a great job of identifying most of the issues that I talked about last time in our 5 major issues, but I was admittedly a bit confused as to how the accommodations for the fire truck are supposed to work and whether or not that was vetted through the fire chief.
So as we discussed, I believe together with the fire chief, that there would be a mountable curb, and that was added to the plan set that was submitted last week. It was also in one of the slides that I can bring up if that's helpful to look at.
Yeah, I think there was no specific, it was my understanding, it was to have an accommodation that the fire truck could pull off of Bassett Street.
Yep.
It wasn't specific to a mountable curb. Your folks referenced that as a potential solution. But what is shown right now to me doesn't provide a reasonable accommodation. And I was confused as to why there was a grass strip on the back side of the mountable curb. I was just hoping someone could sort of describe what the approach was there.
Yeah, I don't know,
Um,
Connor.
I guess that would be Mr. Valdez, but go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
No, it could be Frank. Just going to ask Connor or Frank.
Okay, Connor,
Who
whomever
drew
you-
that? Who drew that portion of the plan? Because I understand the question.
I'm sorry, Peter, what were you, which piece were you asking me? Again?
Where the plan shows what we're calling the mountable curb for the fire engine to pull off the road. And Sean is saying that it's either an unclear detail or an ambiguous detail. And I don't know if you can pull it up and explain it. And if you can't pull it, explain it.
So I do have the plan open here. Our intent is to provide a mountable curb. I believe the length is about 30 feet to provide a fire truck access to mount onto the curb. That will be a reinforced turf section. We want to separate the pedestrian sidewalk from the mountable curb, as that's not a condition that we provide on a public sidewalk, a slope curb adjacent to a pedestrian sidewalk. So we can certainly clarify the detail, but that's the intent, that the sidewalk would not be adjacent to a sloped curb.
Understood. Has the chief been engaged in any discussion about the accommodation?
Not since we discussed with him what he was looking for and then we provided it. So we figured that that was closed. But we can definitely check back in with him for a fourth time though. I'm sure he'd love to hear from me.
Yeah, the way it's currently conceived, I don't think it provides any tangible benefit. So yeah, I'll have to think about it a little bit more now that I know why that the way it is. Thank you.
So if this isn't, I'm confused at your confusion a little bit. So we were told there needs to be a place on the sidewalk that the fire truck can come off the street. We provided that. So what further?
No, I don't think you have, because there's.
Okay, well, we'll talk about one.
Yeah, just Jen, for reference, if the truck is more than 25 feet long,
yeah,
there's no way it can get up onto the curb and off the curb in 25 feet. So we just looking for a little bit more detail on that. And I don't belabor the point. I think you guys did a wonderful job addressing all of the other stuff. So I don't want to come off as being negative. It was just the one item that I was hoping to get a little bit more detail on.
So if I may, I just measured it on my plan here. We're providing 45 feet.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is just figure out a little bit more about how it gets up on there, what the expectations are, and then run it by the chief to make sure it's something he's interested in doing, or if it meets his needs. Because if it doesn't work for him, it serves no purpose. So let's just plan to have that conversation if we can.
Mr. Freeman, does that make sense to you?
I certainly don't object to it, other than, the same type of discussion about, I think the great progress, and submissions that we made, and, the question of closing the hearing, but I know we'll discuss that at the end.
Yeah, we will. And see, my concerns here are just to make it very, very clear what open items are going to be submitted if, as and when this hearing ever ends. And so I have the Abbey Park lease, the production of that lease, as something that we're in agreement will be produced and will be included in the evidence at this hearing. And here we also have the fire truck parking that needs to be clarified to a more specific extent. I think what Mr. Reardon is telling us is that that's something that certainly can be easily accomplished, but that's an open item that needs just a little more work.
Chairman Leonard, if I could add in terms of open items, there was a comment I asked about, if you look at the entry off of Franklin Street, there's a portion of the site to the left of the entry that I asked for clarification on what the finished treatments were there. Connor referenced that it was shown on the landscape plan. There's no improvements shown on the landscape plan, and there's no grading shown on the grading plan in that area. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed as well.
Okay, Mr. Nagel, is that something that you understand with some degree of clarity what Mr. Reardon is looking for and that you could produce
Yes,
at a later date?
yes.
Okay, great. So that's our third open item. Mr. Reardon, anything else, or is that it?
And one last thing, I promise, has a lighting plan ever been submitted? I don't recall seeing one.
I know it's been discussed, but I don't know that it's formally been submitted. Mr. Nagel, do you have any recollection about the lighting plan?
I do not.
I was gonna say, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think because we weren't planning to light the exterior of the building significantly, but
Yeah, I mean, we're not, I mean, I don't know what kind of photometrics is necessary. There would be just street poles on the street as required by the city. So is that what they're looking for, to see what the street poles to be provided by the city would provide for light? So I don't know what kind of lighting plan is necessary.
I don't know either, but it's my memory at some point in one of the earlier hearings, there were
I
questions.
think that people were concerned, John, about potential lighting coming from the balconies potentially, or the building into the streets, but we said that there would be no lighting on the building or on the balconies coming into the street. So I thought that we closed that loop in one of the questions that we answered previously, saying there are no lights on the building. The only lights would be really lights on the sidewalk, which would be poles, and lights at the entrance of the apartments that are accessible from Bassett Street, as well as the entry into the residential building. That's about it.
Mr. Chairman, can I just chime in for a minute here?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Go ahead.
If there are going to be exterior lights, we need to see a lighting plan. If there's going to be light on the sidewalk, a photometric plan, I think, is an appropriate request there. Very typical of every development project we've reviewed.
Is there a particular light fixture that the city uses for sidewalks, so we could take that light fixture and give it to our consultant?
We're looking for an analysis of the fixtures that you're putting on your building. So
We're not putting
proposing,
any fixtures in our building. The only fixtures would be sidewalk poles and lights into the entry, but there are no lights on the building or in balconies.
I mean, if you're saying that there's going to be no light spillover onto the public way, then awesome. That would be great. I'd like to see that demonstrated, I guess, is what we're saying.
Yeah, so is this in addition to the request? I don't think that this was on any of the outstanding items that we had. So is this a new request from the board?
Well, it really depends upon whether there are lights on the building. If, as Mr. Valdez says, there's no lights on the building, then I think the photo analysis plan is not necessary. But you
lights in the courtyard?
There are lights in the courtyard. There would be poles in the courtyard for parking, but that's outside of the public realm. Do you want a full photometrics of the?
Well, I want to know the light fixtures in the parking lot would be. It's already a constrained parking lot, and
okay, yeah, we can get you a photometrics study and light poles of the parking lot. If that's what you need, then that's readily accessible. Yes.
If I may interject just really briefly, I recall discussions about lighting on Adams Court as well. I'm not sure if that's history that has expired or if that's a remaining intention of lighting up Adams Court as well.
Yeah. So is there a particular photometric point that we're trying to hit in particular areas? I know that in the parking lot, we need to hit a 0.9 at the bumpers, but is there a particular number that we're looking to hit at the Adams Court passageway so that we can provide lighting that is accordingly?
I think, right, go ahead.
I just want to see what the applicant's plan is for lighting the space that they have. That's all.
All right. Yes.
Agreed. I think it's just our need to review your proposal.
Okay. Yeah, we can provide lights.
Okay. Then the last thing that I have on my checklist here before we go to Mr. Galvin, Peter Freeman is, and you correct me if my memory is faulty here. Do you intend to be submitting to the board a list of waivers from this, the various regulations that you're requesting on this project?
Yes, but we have submitted that, and I believe it was updated, but in any case, we definitely already submitted that at the very beginning of the application.
Okay, and let's put it this way, are you content with the present content of the list of waivers, or do you need to update that?
No, we're satisfied with them. It was updated in October.
Okay, great. Then let me just ask Sean, because I'm not an engineer. Sean, are you comfortable with the waivers that are being requested by the applicant for this application are within the application and updated as Mr. Freeman has suggested?
Yeah, I have to admit, I haven't looked through the waivers yet.
Okay, well,
I would second that too, Mr. Leonard. I have not had the time to review the waiver request.
yeah, well, I'm more concerned with whether the requested waivers are there. And so what I think I'd like to do, if possibly, Sean, I'm going to go back to Mr. Galvin now and let him finish his presentation. But if you could take a quick look at the waivers, do you have that information accessible to you?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay. But well, maybe that's another issue to add to our open list of items, to make sure that whatever waivers are being requested by the applicant, that we have that information in Mr. Freeman's memory, and I believe him 100%, is that the waivers are contained in the application and have been updated, I believe he said as of October 2021, and they represent the waivers that the applicant is requesting. And as long as that's so, then I'm content with that. I just wanted to raise it because I didn't have that memory. But if for whatever reason, those waivers are not contained in the documents and need to be updated in light of some of the changes we've been making here, that would be an additional open item that would have to be dealt with fairly promptly so that the hearing process is complete. So I have 5 items that I have as open items: the Abbey Park lease, the issue of fire truck parking, more detail needed, the finish on the entryway off of Franklin Street, a photometric plan, if needed, showing the lighting on the project, probably the exterior of the building, but I think Mr. Reardon may have wanted to see the lighting on the interior of the premises as well. And a list of requested waivers from the applicant. Those are the 5 items that I have as outstanding items to be added to the record of this application. So I think without further ado, Mr. Galvin, do you want to be heard on some of the other comments and
Yes,
issues you want to raise?
yes.
Good.
So
Thank you for your patience, by the way.
I'm trying not to interrupt. It's all it's going to do is prolong it. So in any event, right from the get-go, I think that the East Milton Neighborhood Association has tried to be consistent about its concerns, and the massing and scale of this building has been amongst its primary concerns. I appreciate the fact that the applicant believes they have a good-looking building. It's very large. It's the largest building in this section of town. It's right next to single-family residences. It's across the street from the Shaughnessy property. You've seen when it wasn't scaled back several feet at the top level, what it did in terms of shading the residences that exist on the opposite side of the street and even down the street. I would suggest that moving the 5th floor back 7 feet doesn't do much to really ameliorate the impact of such a large building. And while it may provide some measure of articulation and may have result in a loss of a unit or 2, it doesn't make my clients feel all warm and fuzzy that they've done anything to realize that this is really a transitional property, not the end goal for the entire section of East Milton. Stepping back the 4th floor 1 foot 3 inches, I think is nice. I don't think it does anything to add or detract. And if you look at the top 2 floors, the 4th and the 5th floor, what we see now is some type of a white-sided building with a number of windows on it. And it's very plain. It doesn't look like anything in the area. It's very distinctive to itself. It doesn't even look like the rest of the building. And I thought perhaps there might be some comments about whether that was an appropriate type of design scheme. But I can tell you, our perspective is that it does nothing to diminish the impact of the height and bulk of the structure on the people that live immediately adjoining to it. I kind of thought, and a question that I had was, if they're stepping back the 5th floor back 7 feet, then we're going to have balconies in that area, because the other concern was at the 4th and 5th floors along Bassett Street, there's that wide open area. And obviously we do not want to see a evening use of that area because of its impact. The lighting, I have to imagine there's got to be some lighting on that atrium area up there on the 4th floor. And I do think a lighting plan is helpful because all of their lighting has to be dark sky compliant. A number of my clients want to know what the story with Adams Court is, because initially we heard that it was going to be a public thoroughfare up to Adams Street, and we haven't heard much about that in quite some time. So we're interested in that. But again, I'm not sure we're convinced, as much as Mr. Bomer might be, that they've done enough here to make this property a transition property. With respect to, I've already addressed parking, so I'm not going to say another word about it. Loading is another concern of ours, because like parking, if you don't have enough of it on site, there'll be plenty of it in the neighborhood. And you've already heard some of the neighbors that are likely, I believe they're members of the East Milton Neighborhood Association, talk about their concerns about loading of vehicles. There isn't a dedicated loading space on this site, and the person that's maybe going to be there full-time, maybe not going to be there full-time, is apparently going to manage this. I don't know what happens when a truck that's small enough to fit under the Franklin Street entrance pulls in and begins to unload for a moving van, or is making deliveries to several residents of groceries, or all the other types of things that get delivered and could get delivered in that courtyard. But I can tell you this, there won't be any cars driving through that area when there's someone loading there. There just isn't enough room. And if parking spaces are being lost here, that's also defeating the purposes of the parking. What we don't want to see is even more vehicles that have to be inextricably involved in loading or unloading here further into this neighborhood than they already are. Again, it's customary, and I've been involved in other 40B projects, including on Randolph Avenue. There's always loading spaces. Those buildings are very large. I think that's this 93 units there and the 2 buildings that are there. Plenty of loading. There was plenty of parking in those as well. So again, that's a concern of ours, because if there's not enough loading here, or it doesn't work and it's not going to be managed, it's a problem. And the applicant is asking you to trust them, and I'm sure that they're very nice people and they're very well-intentioned people, but we would prefer to trust but verify, because trying to fix this after the fact is not going to work. Once this bell is rung, once this building is up, we just have problems that can't be fixed. It sounds to me like there's still peer review ongoing. When peer review is completed, it is typically the process where the board kind of proposes conditions and action on waivers that the applicant can then evaluate as to whether it will accept or reject. And if it rejects them on the basis of economics, and it sounds to me like they're already at the threshold, then the board has the authority, and I would say the obligation, to have that peer review and those claims tested by its own peer review consultant. And we may be approaching that, but as Ms. Barrett would tell you, it's not appropriate to do the financial peer review until all other peer review is completed. And it sounds to me like we're not there yet. But the abutters here have a list of some conditions that I'll read you and I'll submit as well. And if the applicant is taking the view that these and any conditions that the board might impose render the project uneconomic, we're asking you not to trust them, not because they're not trustworthy, but we're asking you to verify what they say, because it's very customary these days for developers to submit projects that are uneconomic as proposed. And they do that for a variety of reasons, because the project might be sufficiently large that the uneconomic return is good enough for them, or there's no other alternatives. And I really think that the board, in order to have an understanding of its responsibilities, needs to have its own peer review consultant evaluate whether what is being claimed in the pro forma that's been submitted is accurate, because the board needs to know whether it can impose conditions that are designed to ameliorate or mitigate the impact of this project. And I agree with, in part, with what Mr. Freeman, Attorney Freeman, has said. If there's a matter of local concern, but it doesn't, and you've imposed a condition, but it doesn't render the project uneconomic, they have no basis to challenge it. So as you're beginning your framing your conditions here, obviously we want you to pay attention to the issues that we've raised, but we would very much appreciate the board undertaking that responsibility to evaluate the financial claims that they're making. We think they can do a lot better in terms of the density of this project, because the density of this project is what creates the problems for my clients. The parking, the loading, the stormwater issues. And I don't think I have anything else to offer at this particular moment, but these are the very same concerns we've stated from day one, and they made more progress in the last plan set than they made in the preceding 7 months. Perhaps they'll make some more.
Well, thank you, Mr. Galvin. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Galvin?
No questions.
Mr. Gray, do you have any questions of Mr. Galvin?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Peter Freeman, do you have any questions of Mr. Galvin or comments on his statements?
I don't have any questions, just a few, in a way, summation comments. The last comment that he just made, I addressed in my opening way back at the beginning. You know, I appreciate on the pro formas and possible review by a peer reviewer, I appreciate his distinguishing between, you know, the fact that he doesn't trust, it's not that he doesn't trust us, it's just that, rather, let me rephrase it. He said he does not say that we're untrustworthy, but yet you can't trust the numbers. I'm not sure that there's a meaningful distinction. I just have to sincerely and totally sincerely just say, you know, it's late in the game to be going through peer review. You know, the numbers are trustworthy. Corcoran is trustworthy. It's just self-evident from the figures that what we have said, you know, is accurate. And, you know, we brought this up the last time. I just can't see, and I can't in good conscience advise my client that it makes sense to extend for another month or two to have peer review. And I said that last time, and it's not meant in any way to be confrontational or disagreeable. It's just that, you know, we did what you requested. We submitted the comparisons, different pro formas. We provided lock, stock, and barrel, the 40B regulation statements on how you analyze uneconomic or economic return. And we've given the figures. And all that's going to happen with more review and more time is, you know, just the costs are going to go up. So the project isn't going to become more economic because of time passing. Costs are going to go up. Might rents go up a little more? Yeah, but the rents, I mean, the costs have certainly been going up dramatically in this industry. So, you know, I'm not saying that the regulations under 40B do not address the situation of a possible peer review, but it's certainly intended that, you know, if there are concerns that a board has and a desire to reduce units or to make a change, that the natural result is a reduction of units or other costly aspects for a project, you know, then there's been plenty of time for those to be stated, and peer review on financial could have been done earlier. So, and I've been around the horn with many different projects, and, you know, often on the rentals, perhaps more than on a for sale project. On a for sale project, it is often perhaps more appropriate to go into analysis on the pro forma because, you know, what are the correct market sales prices? It's a projection. You know, the rents are really supported by current market studies, including the affordable rents are fixed by the state agencies in terms of the formula. And, you know, the differences in return are just that much more important, even when they're fairly small. But as a percentage change, as our charts pointed out, the change from the beginning to now is over 20% in terms of how much less the return is. And as I said earlier, you know, it's at the 5% absolute minimum that the developer and investors will accept, which is, and it is below what the 40B guidelines show as being uneconomic. You know, so, you know, I just have to say sincerely and respectfully, that's our position on that. And, you know, the other concerns that have been raised have been thoroughly discussed tonight. And, you know, we believe that we really have addressed them. And I think there's sort of an acknowledgement from the board that that's the case. The final thing as to Mr. Galvin's comments, I would say is, yes, there are at this point a few outstanding questions and or deliverables, but really with the, you know, the months of review, and again, as I said earlier, thorough and professional review by Mr. Reardon and Mr. Bomer, you know, there's really, to say, as Mr. Galvin said, that the peer review isn't finished, I think is, you know, maybe literally true, but a bit of an exaggeration in that the pure essence, the main essence, and all of the things haven't been addressed except a few deliverables, which we're willing to live with as conditions, by the way, as I said earlier. So, I think it's really not appropriate to view that the peer review isn't completed. So, I'll end with that. If it's, summation for the project, even then, I don't really feel the need to make a closing statement other than, you still have to keep in mind the 40B standard. There is a need for affordable housing. Actually, one other response to both Mr. Galvin and a few of the speakers again on the parking, not to beat a dead horse, but, both in terms of the impact of the community by the size of the project, and density is a basically meaningless term. The question is, you could have theoretically a 200 units if the impacts are acceptable. And I'm not saying that we could have 200 units on this site, don't get me wrong, but you have to go through step by step the impacts of the intensity of the use, regardless of how many uses. The density itself per acre is just a number. And we, again, believe that we've more than adequately addressed things, as pretty much backed up by your peer reviewers now, which we appreciate. But the other thing is, if you look at that vision plan, which of course is a vision, nobody's saying that there's been a proposal or anything else has been permitted. But if you look at this location in the vision plan, it actually shows buildings that are of equal or similar stories. I'm not going to say that it was exactly the same number of stories, but it was close, higher than is in the community presently. It also showed some retail use. Retail use, frankly, would clearly contribute more parking than our project is going to create. And again, I say that just in a way as a benchmark to some degree, in that is what your own planner, which happens to be Judy Planner, your consultant planner, I didn't mean Tim, consultant, has suggested. It doesn't mean it's adopted as a town policy or anything like that. I'm not raising it to that level, but it clearly is something that the town, is contemplating. And again, it calls for a project that would have more impact than our proposal as modified. So I will end with that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Zawinski, let me just ask you on behalf of the town, do you have any comments on the issue of economic feasibility and whether that should be peer reviewed, or do you want to weigh in on that or not? You don't have to do it.
I don't really want to weigh in on it, except to say that I think it's got to be based on, the conditions that the board chooses to place on the project. I think that, in other projects, we've reached a point of having conditions that were broadly acceptable to both the board and the applicant. And I think we need to, proceed in that vein until we can't. And so I think, it's an open question until we get to a condition that the applicant doesn't find to be acceptable or would make their project economically unfeasible. So I think we should have a frank discussion about what sort of conditions the board would want to put on the project, and then kind of go from there. While I have you, though, I think there may be some punch list type items and documents that either Cliff or Sean may want to bring up just to add to your list of outstanding.
Hi, thanks, Tim. I think that I agree with Tim's analysis, and I don't disagree with Attorney Freeman's comments about deliverables. That I think acknowledging that there are outstanding deliverables is important, and how that's expressed through conditions is really important and needs to be worked out. A couple small examples are, and I'll let Mr. Reardon speak for himself, but there are conflicts in the documents that I think may have led to his concern about the mountable curb. It's shown one way in at least one of the civil drawings. It's shown differently in the landscape drawings. So just making sure that the board's really aware of what the design intent is critical. Similarly, missing build, I can read from the from the proposed perspective views, I can read what the intent is, but the intent needs to be backed up with documents that really show us in a little better detail what we're looking at. So I think that's where I'm at. Is I think from an architectural perspective, at least, I think I'm understanding design intent, but tidying up the coordination of the documents really is important. So at the end of the day, we're not wondering which should we look at, this drawing or a different drawing. I'll pass it over to Mr. Reardon, see if he has similar feelings on that.
Yeah, I think that the next steps for me are just to document what remaining issues I have in a letter. I think, you know, of the 5 issues that we discussed last time as being major issues, I think 4 of them are resolved, completely. And the water, sewer, and drain issues to me are completely addressed. Now it's just a matter of just, like Cliff said, just fine tuning the last little bit. I think we made so much progress over the last submission that, to Attorney Galvin's point, now we just have sort of the finer aspects that we just got to button up.
Let me ask you, Mr. Reardon, are you suggesting that they be wrapped up in another hearing here? Or are you suggesting that they be wrapped up as part of the review of the waivers and decision writing process?
I'm a little uncertain as to what we're allowed to do once we close the public part of the hearing. Like, for example, are we allowed to provide review comments to the board after the hearing's closed? Or the reason I ask is because at a minimum, I'd like the opportunity to craft one last letter that closes out all the closed out documents and recommends appropriate conditions for anything that's outstanding. I just don't know if I can do that if the hearing's closed.
Let me, that's an interesting question, and let me ask somebody who has expertise here. Judy Barrett, are you still with us?
I saw that she left.
Oh, no.
She's there.
Judy,
There
are
you
you
go.
there?
You're muted, Judy.
I'm back.
Oh, she's back.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
okay.
Well, welcome back, Judy.
Oh, yeah, I really needed this. What's the matter?
Did you hear Sean's question? Sean's question was if the meeting ends this evening,
Yep.
let's assume the applicant elects not to give an extension for another hearing, say 14 days from now or 30 days from now. Mr. Reardon was uncomfortable as to how much further he could proceed with his continued review of some of the finer points of the project, such as preparing a more definitive letter on those issues and submitting it to the applicant as part of the quote final review.
You mean if the hearing closes tonight?
Yes.
Well, I don't know how anything can be submitted after that. I mean, the board certainly couldn't consider it.
Well, we can consider items that we agree that can be submitted that aren't present in our physical hands this evening, but that exist and we want as part of the record. And we have 5 items that we've discussed.
But then how would anybody else have an opportunity to review them, John? If they're entered into the public record after the fact?
Because
what if someone else wanted to review them and comment on them or provide testimony to the board? That's just not my practice, but I'm going to defer to you.
I'll hear from you in a second, Peter, but I think that certainly if we adopt that position, and I really don't know the formal answer to that, I'll ask my fellow board members. If we adopt that position, this hearing will never end. It will go on for 5 years. because everyone will want to review every document that's being offered. And you're in a never-ending hopeless cycle. For example, the Abbey Park lease, it exists, with the substance of it's been discussed. And if this case happened to be appealed, I realize the appeal process is a new ball game. It's an open process. It's a de novo process, to talk legal speak. But certainly that lease was discussed at this hearing, and it would be helpful for somebody reading the record to have that lease. I don't know why that lease can't be entered by agreement of the parties, non pro tunc, so to speak, after the hearing formally closed, because we agreed it could be part of the record before the hearing closed. So I don't really have a lot of difficulty with that as you do. Certainly, items that haven't been mentioned and haven't been agreed upon are no longer admissible at the hearing. And that's one of the questions here. So I guess the question is the extent to which I think for Mr. Reardon, in good faith, I say to write a 5 or 6 page letter to the applicant requesting the applicant's comments and agreements on all of that, I think probably crosses the line,
Right.
And is not permissible under these circumstances.
I agree.
But on the other hand, on the issue of whether the board under these circumstances should request the opportunity of having a review of the feasibility of the project, I certainly can discuss that with my fellow board members. But as everyone at this hearing knows, that I think today is the last night of the agreeable times within which this hearing could end. And so we would need the applicant's consent to that type of review. And I guess my question is, do you want to weigh in on that issue? The way it's been presented here and the way it's arisen, does it make any sense for you to recommend that the board at least seek that type of review from the applicant? Or is the issue of feasibility sufficiently raised in the record that and since any appeal of this will be a de novo hearing, that it makes no sense to try to wait 30, 60, or 90 days to continue all of this stuff and find ourselves back in the same place with two experts having opposite opinions on that same issue, which is never going to be determinative before this board.
So, Mr. Chair, I did, at your request, inquire about having a pro forma review. The individual that I would have entrusted that duty to is not going to be available for at least another month. So.
And then once he's available, how long would it take him to perform the review?
Well, typically, they start doing the review, but then they have questions. So part of the review is about questioning or verifying some of the assumptions in the pro forma. Yep. Did the construction costs make sense? Did the site development costs make sense? So there's a bit of a back and forth that takes place between the peer review consultant for the pro forma and the architect peer review or the engineer peer review. So it can take a few weeks. It's not something that's done overnight, that's for sure. So I did inquire. I just want you to know, and that party is not available for a while.
No, I appreciate that. Let me check with my fellow board members. Jeff Mullen, where are you on this issue of trying to extend this hearing for another 30 or 60 days? in order to get further information on financial feasibility? Or is it preferable here to have the record as we have it and to move forward with trying to complete this hearing in an expeditious fashion?
I think you're gonna need more time to take in the evidence, but I don't know that it's on financial feasibility. I'm not sure I really even understand that issue any longer because of the testimony that we heard tonight. I mean, I know that the last hearing, we asked for the financial feasibility because of the point made by the applicant on the to the extent that they did what Mr. Boma was asking them to do from a design perspective, it would force the project to be infeasible or cost or lose too much money. But I understand that there's been a lot of progress on that tonight. So I'm wondering if there maybe hasn't, if there still is that need, if Mr. Boma continues to have that issue with the Franklin Street facade. So that was a question I had as we were proceeding with the hearing. So I'm confused on the point. And then secondly, I would like to see Mr. Reardon close up the outstanding issues that we've heard. And, you know, I mean, we've had some testimony tonight that the applicant might want to respond to as well. That's up to the applicant. But those are the issues that I think I would like some clarity on, John.
Okay, Mr. Gray, what do you have to say on those issues?
Well, far be it for me to want to extend these hearings 1 second longer than they need to be. I think we've heard a ton of testimony, and I guess what I'm struggling with is the concerns Mr. Galvin raised this evening about the massing of the building sound to me as if the only thing that would satisfy the neighborhood is to make a significant reduction in the size of the building. I guess I'm to understand from the pro forma that was submitted, the revised one for this hearing, that any further reduction in the size of the units would make the project uneconomic. Is that the applicant's position?
Yes.
Okay. If the building was cut in half just for, so that the construction costs were in half, does that also make the project uneconomic? I mean, I'm asking as an estate planner. I'm not a construction person. I'm not a developer. I'm just trying to get, ask a question that someone in the neighborhood might, who's, my feeling from the first time seeing this project was that this is too big a building to fit in that small space. That's been my overall impression. So I've been listening to the testimony and figuring out the rules and trying to figure out what you're allowed to do and what changes the board is allowed to make, what conditions the board can impose. And so the issue of the financial viability of the project, if a serious reduction in the units were made, is to me the crux of the matter at the moment. So if the applicant is unwilling to extend the hearing further, and I completely understand why, we've had, this has taken a long time for various reasons out of all of our control, then the board would be unable, I guess, to do the financial feasibility portion of it, which I guess the applicant is saying we don't need to do, but maybe we do need. So I guess is the applicant allowed a veto in effect on the financial feasibility portion of it by failing to agree to an extension? Is that sort of where we are?
Well, that's a rhetorical question, and
I guess. I mean, I don't know who I'm asking, but that's
I know.
What I'm hearing is we would need, if we were going to do a feasibility, a peer review. Forgive me if I'm using the wrong word. If we were going to do a peer review of the financial portion of it, we would need more time. The applicant doesn't, so far, my understanding is, doesn't want to extend the evidence portion of the hearing, and I completely understand that. I don't really either, but it sounds to me like we would be unable to get that information. Is that kind of where we are, Chairman, or Mr. Freeman, help me out here?
Well, let me do that. Let me do it.
Somebody
this
help
way.
me out.
Let me ask. I'll try to help you out.
Yeah.
I may go in deeper than you want me to go. I think it's really just a simple matter here. We've had multiple hearings over a long period of time. And I think a lot of progress has been made here on the significant issues that have been really separating us here. The real question to me is does it make sense for the board to be requesting continuances of perhaps 60 days or more from the applicant to do a study of feasibility when in my view of things, it's not going to be determinative of any issue in this case is presently before the Board of Appeals. All it's going to be is one side saying A and the other side saying X, and it's not going to get us anywhere. It's an issue that nobody's waiving in the sense that well, it came up too late and now it's too late to get all the evidence on it, because our hearing, if as and when it's appealed, you can throw our decision out the window. It means nothing. It has no real probative value to
I
the
understand what you're saying. You're making me feel great at that with that statement, Mr. Leonard. But I understand. I know what you mean. Yeah, it's an overview. I get it.
And I'm not going to make a big speech about the hack. It's going to go
Yeah, I understand.
for the Housing Appeals Committee. And so in that sense, everyone is free to litigate for as long as the hack will put up with it.
Yeah.
Of state issues regarding financial feasibility, and by the time this is ever heard by hack, everyone has plenty of time to get all of the studies and information that they need on that issue if they really want to make it an issue. So in a sense, I'm pleased by the progress that have been made on what I think the issues of concern to the Board of Appeals are here. And so the applicant has been cooperative. Mr. Galvin's been cooperative. The experts have been cooperative on both sides of the street. So I guess this, just for the sake of the record, Mr. Freeman, are you able to tell us whether under the present circumstances of this case, the applicant would grant a continuance of 30 or 60 days for the working out of final details of this matter and or for a study of financial feasibility, or is it the applicant's position is that everyone has had time to do that and it's time for the evidence here to end?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my answer is not just a simple yes or no. It's going to pick up on a lot of the things that have been said and just a couple of comments on the financial. So for all the reasons that many of you have already said, no, we cannot agree to what I would say lengthy extension continuance of another 30 to 60 days, because if it's for financial review, it's going to be more, as Judy said, which I appreciate her candor, of course, which she always is. It's going to be longer than 30 days. So we just can't agree to that much time for two reasons. One that you stated, I'll just reiterate, it may well be dueling experts, although we are fully confident in the accuracy of our pro forma. But that said, and the last thing we want is to appeal, we feel as though we've made great progress and we're hopeful we'll get a decision that we don't have to appeal. And I'm not just saying that, I mean, that's our hope. But if there were to be an appeal, then yeah, it's all de novo. So what is said and reviewed, if it were reviewed now, basically, as you said, Mr. Chairman, is thrown out the window. More importantly, I would say that very much though in the spirit of cooperation. I do understand that there are a few deliverables, and the quote unquote legal question that was asked, which Judy addressed a bit, I think it was Mr. Gray who asked it. I'm not going to chime in on the, legal is probably a bit gray, but under the circumstances with things really clearly very finite and a few deliverables and answers, I've been checking with my client by the other technology, text messages. We do agree to a continuance if we have this finite list that won't include peer review and financial. I mean, we'd be happy to talk about it with you since we're saying now we will, we agree to another hearing. I would hope it could be scheduled in about 2 weeks with the understanding with tonight that it's a very finite set of open items and deliverables, which would include Mr. Reardon's final comments that we would have time to review, and that those would be the matters that we would discuss. So I think we already went through what those things are. If you'd like to conclude, if we're almost at that point after 10 o'clock with what those things are again, then yes, we do agree to a continuance for that purpose and to limit the next hearing, to those items.
Let me just ask you a question about your availability. If we extend it out a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, whatever we do, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Galvin this basically the same question, and maybe Bev can be looking at her calendar and see if we have anything available. Without putting a crimp, I understand you're heading to California for family matters. What time frame is convenient for your schedule?
Well, as I said on that other hearing, which I do have in my calendar, since we would like to wrap up as soon as possible, 2 weeks would be February 2nd, which is fine. If it needs to be for other people's, be it my team or you folks, February 9th, that's okay, because I believe we did agree, yes, we do have a substantive hearing on my other client's project on February 9th, which will be the introductory, presentation. So I'll be, if I'm in California, I will be zooming in from California. It'll still be early where I will be if I'm in California, and that's fine. So we could do it on any of those nights, the 2nd or the 9th. I would hope it wouldn't have to go beyond that, but that's basically my schedule, and I appreciate your asking.
But let me just ask Bev.
Please do. Yes, anything but those Wednesdays.
Those are the nights that we've decided to commit to the new projects.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, sir, any other day but Wednesdays,
Well,
if you
yeah.
can make that work.
Right.
Then the Thursdays and those up 3 weeks that I mentioned would also be fine with me.
So that would be the
February,
3rd and the 10th?
The 20, I'm sorry, yes, that would be the 3rd and
yes, exactly, yeah.
How are those dates? Bev, are they open?
I think the 10th, I would prefer, on everyone's behalf, because there's a little flexibility in case something comes up in between. So if that would work out, then we can secure it.
Okay, and the virtual people will be available for us?
Well, I think so, yes.
Okay, all right.
Right now, yes, because we're pretty well into February, so there's nothing other than Wednesdays that we need to think about now.
Let's ask Mr. Mullen. Jeff, are you available on the 10th of February?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes, both the 3rd and the 10th of February are okay.
Mr. Bob Galvin, does the 10th, is that convenient for you?
Yes.
Okay. Then why isn't the proposal then we continue this hearing until February? I'm sorry?
Excuse me?
Yes.
May I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure.
We've had an attendee with his hand up for some time. May we bring him up on?
Well, it
or-
depends what he's going to ask. We've discussed all the evidence and we're
Okay,
getting,
well, I have no idea. So,
well, who has his hand up?
Pixel.
Mr. or
No,
Miss?
it just says Pixel XL.
Okay, well,
And then
Also-
Joe Corcoran. So
Corcoran, right.
I just, yes.
well, why don't I do this? Is it Miss, you don't know Miss or Mrs.?
No,
or-
there's no reference to
Okay,
that.
let me take a guess. Mr. Pixel, are you there? Mr. Pixel or Miss Pixel?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, could you just identify yourself so we'll have it for the record?
Yeah, sorry about that. My name is John Shaughnessy. My wife spoke earlier about a question about the drawings to Miss Carrie Pike. I just have a quick observation about that, if that's okay.
Well, why don't I do this? Let me give you 1 minute because we've gone far beyond that portion of the hearing here.
Understood. I'll be quick, and
Okay.
I've had my hand raised during that portion, but I don't think I was called. But however, I'm looking at the drawings, and I just think that they're incomplete. She has these auto turn templates that show cars coming in and out of the entrances. However, they don't include the opposite side of the street on Bassett or Franklin, so you can't see the width of the streets. You can't see both sides of the street, the incoming traffic, if cars are going to be able to go around these. And they don't also include the legal parking spots that are on Bassett and Franklin, if cars are going to be able to operate around those parking spaces. So if she could include these in some drawings so it provides a better observation for us, that would be appreciated.
Okay, that's great, Mr. Shaughnessy. Thank you, and thank you for being brief. And we'll just leave that to Carrie Pike to add that to her list of things to consider here. So thank you very much. Mr. Bob Galvin, does the 10th, is that convenient for you to?
Yes, we will be available for the 10th.
Okay, so then by agreement of the parties here, we're going to go over to February 10th at 7 p.m. This will be a brief hearing, and in the interim, we'll ask that Mr. Reardon, if he's going to write a letter to the applicant with additional considerations, that really be done as promptly as possible, and that on the present state of the record here, we will have delivered well before the 10th the Abbey Park lease, more detail on the fire truck parking from the applicant, some information regarding the finished treatment of the entry off of Franklin Street, a photometric plan showing the lighting on the exterior of the building, if any, there may not be any, and also for the parking area that Mr. Reardon has required.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, if I could interject one final comment.
Sure, yes, go ahead.
I think I would request that you not limit, with all due respect to Mr. Reardon's analysis, which I have total respect for. I know you know that. I would request that there are other issues that have to do with really basic architectural submissions, exhibits, as well as some drawing coordination issues. So I would just request that you consider allowing Mr. Reardon and me to assemble a combined list of outstanding exhibits. I don't think there are many that we haven't already heard about tonight, but I just don't want those to end up downstream of where we've already been.
That's perfectly acceptable to me, as long as it's done promptly, and as long as it's with the understanding that we want to try to bring this hearing to a conclusion on the 10th, and not to be opening up issues that are going to result in matters being requested for another 30 days or another 40 days. So I just ask that you be reasonable, but not excessively fastidious in your additional requests on the applicant, so we can get this hearing over with.
Fully understood.
Okay, so with that as a proviso, this hearing is going to be continued until the 10th. Let me just get my notes again. Is it the 10th or the 9th? I think it's the 10th. The 10th of February at 7 p.m. With the hope that it's not going to be a hearing of repetition of evidence heard tonight, and that we can bring these hearings to a prompt and concise finalization. I want to thank everybody for their good humor and their patience. I think this was from my perspective, this was a very productive meeting. I think it was very helpful to everybody in the long run. I want to thank everybody for participating and listening. Mr. Mullen, do you have any final comments or words of wisdom?
No, John.
Okay, Mr. Gray, how about you?
Absolutely no wisdom. Thank you.
Okay, great. And hopefully no comments. So we're continued until the February 10th at 7 o'clock, where we can end the evidence portion of this hearing, and thank everybody thank you for attending, and be in good health until the 10th. Thanks. We're adjourned.
Take care, everyone. Good night.
Yep.
Thank
Good
you.
night.